It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Sunday, January 25th, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. Very focused show today. Few extra points aside from the shooting that took place that I'm going to make, in conjunction with that are very important. A few opening points that I want to make, following up on some of the points we made in the previous show, sort of connected to Davos, World Economic Forum, but very much relates to the point we're going to make today. We're going to break this down as clear as possible, as objective as possible, as nonpartisan as possible, as always, and try to be rational about this. And I just mean this in the most important way right now, because there's so much emotion and so much partisan division and hatred and vitriol being promoted by the very people acting like they're the unity team. And I mean that whoever's in power, it's not unique to left and right. The left does the exact same thing, and they are doing it to some degree now. You'll just recognize it's a more pronounced effort when they're the one in power, and it's a teeter-totter, and they use that overreach and the actions to justify the way they respond to bring that cycle right back around. It never seems to stop. The difference today is that I think most Americans are genuinely seeing this to a point that they never have before. I think that's why a lot of this is happening. But we're going to go through this as rational as possible and break down the legalities of it. And the reason I titled it the way I did is because it's sort of like with the Renee Good conversation. An honest observer of this, there's very objectively obvious things. Same with Renee Good. That what you can see when we get into the video of the gun being pulled before by one of the officers, it's all very clear despite all the lies. We'll go through that at the end today, because at this point, I don't think it's as important to highlight the lies to start, because I think it's pretty objective. It's obvious to most people that this administration, this government, both sides of it, is very dishonest, repeatedly caught by even Grok, for that matter, or Twitter, which I do think makes a difference for some people. So we're going to show you all that at the end. It shouldn't be as long as usual, but it still might. We'll see. It depends on how we get into these different things. But we're going to go over all of it and show you the dishonesty, the reactions of people that are worthy of attention, I think, but just go over the actual facts that we can see and break down what I think this is leading to, what may be driving this. And even if, as I highlighted, this is just negligence, there is an element of this whole conversation where that's being taken advantage of, whether those officers are aware of what we're talking about. It's important to understand all of this, but I want to start quickly with something. We recently had a very successful fundraiser. I believe we're going to kind of officially end the page that's up pretty soon. Just wanted to give one more shout out in general, that how important that was and how much that meant to all of us, and just the overwhelming support that we got. I wanted to say on that note that I've reached out to pretty much everybody personally who is supposed to be getting something per their donations, seed packs, or one-on-one engagement with Derek or I. And then a couple of the others will be reached out by either Derek or Etienne. So if you believe that you were one of the people that should be receiving something and have not got a notification by me or somebody else, please reach out to one of us. Let me know. It could just be confusion. There might have been somebody donated right before you or so on, but I'll do my best to get back to you. But as of right now, I've contacted everybody. So if you haven't heard from me, let me know if you think that. And most of them are either on the way or about to be sent out. So, and a lot of you, just like last time, were ultimately like, you know what, we just rather you keep that for your future. It's I'm actually going to reach out to people next to them to see if they want it, like a secondary, runner-up kind of a thing. But anyway, just an amazing turnout, and really thank you to all for the support. But let's get right into it today. A lot to talk about. I want to start with some points that are carryover from the last show that I think are relevant because of what this all is connected to. And just the simple point to make about the larger conversation is we're watching this transition in this country, which again, I have my opinions about the larger part of that, or where it's driving from, or what it may amount to, but we need to be honest about this happening. It's not a secret. It's being signaled. It's outlined for us. And there may be even different agendas from different factions within all this that have a different design on it. But realize this is very clearly happening. And I'll give you my quick points of what I see in this, but I want you to think about how this national police force dynamic plays into that. and whether there are outside forces who are even more so involved that may be playing a factor in that as well. Just consider all of this. But the last show we did, I think, is worth your time. Gaza's Board of Peace seeks to reimagine the international border, or in an international order, excuse me. And this is like when we just discussed, that this is a globalist type plan. And that doesn't mean that it has to be involving with literally every aspect of everyone in the world. You don't just begin with that. I mean, the point is all of these, the North American Union, these conversations were starting points to build to a global control. That's what the EU was. That's what you could even discuss the United States as being in somewhat, not all necessarily began that way, but the mindset of having what would otherwise be independent locations with independent leadership or boards or, whatever you want to think that people could organize themselves, or maybe just anarchy in the real sense, that ultimately it became something that's governed by a larger overarching force. That is what this becomes, and it grows and it gets bigger. And right now we're seeing that from the group that's screaming that they're fighting it. In fact, the group that just told us it was dead, it doesn't exist anymore. And now let me lay out for you my globalist plan for Gaza, which is what they did at the World Economic Forum. And the Joneses of the rest came out and told you this was over, we won, just like they did the last time Trump got elected. How did that work out? So here's the show if you want to watch this for yourself. A couple points I wanted you to see. This I just found interesting, the timing of it all. Very much could just be a random thing. Greenland hit by power outage, strong winds in wake of U.S. tension easing. Point being, we know that they're aiming at Greenland. It's not a joke. And there's resistance. And in the midst of all this, we're seeing outages, and, with Iran and so on. And there are examples of Iran doing defensive measures of that. But every time we have this conversation, we know that they're capable of this and have, and in most cases are, manipulating infrastructure for the purpose of their agenda. So it's worth considering that this may be a starting point of what they're trying to quietly strong arm into position. Just worth noting in case that becomes relevant, just my opinion. This I wanted to include. Jason did a good breakdown about a 48-minute part of the larger show, and he titles it or frames it as Davos keeps saying globalism is dead in the water, but their new network states framework copies the same transnational architecture with updated branding. Very important to understand, guys. This is what I believe is happening, obviously, but at least consider where this goes and whether these actions we're seeing and the bait and switch that is this administration, and whether that's because of this. Now, Ryan Grimm added something I found really interesting. I'm surprised I missed this. Within his actual outline of the Board of Peace, Trump, I'll just read what Grimm wrote himself. I know this is obvious, but if you missed it, Trump has appointed himself lifetime leader of the world, as he frames it, but of this board, technically chairman of the Board of Peace forever. Forever. The term never expires. I mean, this is megalomaniac stuff. Think about the idea of creating a board like this that is supposed to be an ongoing kind of manage, and you make yourself the leader forever. This is just insanely ridiculous. But on top of that, think about this in the sense of what we're discussing. You're creating something new. This is how I framed it in regard to that episode, which was, I already closed it, but just, you could see the images. Trump's branding for the Board of Peace is basically the UN logo with a little bit of difference and more of a focus on specifically the technate, which is what that is. That was always meant to be a starting point, guys. I find that wild. But even if you disagree with my framing, the chairman forever is a very weird and obvious thing that does not align with what they pretend they believe in. Here's what Jesse Waters had to say. I find this telling. Personal opinion, but it's definitely telling to me.
Jimmy with his teleprompter. The Trump Board of Peace already doing more than the UN. We're building golf clubs in Gaza. The only thing they'll be fighting over now is tea times.
Aside from the insultingly disgusting thing to say about people who are being genocided, make sure that this is actually playing for you guys. The point for me is that they're already, it is on there, that they're already, he's like, hey, they're doing more than the UN. Now, that may just be their effort. You may frame that as, they're just telling you how bad the UN is. Well, why would it even be compared if you're talking about something completely different? Because obviously, my opinion is that this is supposed to represent, this is supposed to be the new global order dynamic. It's what they're doing. I mean, it's literally what the people around Trump are doing at the very least, whether you think he knows that or not. And as George Galloway says, gaze upon this and wonder, then shudder. Now, here is Elon Musk, who also went to speak. And I just thought this was interesting, as we'll get into some of the commentary toward the end around this conversation. And it's important to recognize where this kind of blind support comes from. Elon Musk stuns the world by going to Davos and to speak. The deep state will not be happy. It's just, you guys do realize that he invited them. He was invited there, right? I think that matters. I'm honestly just embarrassed for these guys at this point. I mean, genuinely, like this, what we're going to get into more today in the part is that it's like I've been telling you, and it's been my opinion. Even right now, it's still my opinion, but I think it's becoming self-evident to everybody that even major conservative, like most of the movement is now calling this out. That doesn't mean they disagree with everything. They may agree with most of the things we may even not want to happen, or illegality, like with the immigration side of it. But when it comes to what they just did with Alex, or even Renee Good, or plenty of other examples, the Epstein files, most of the people in this movement are very frustrated. And I'm starting to see that everywhere. I don't believe that's an opinion anymore, but it still is based on something I can't prove. So consider it. But I just thought this was interesting. Now, on top of that, remember what happened last time? Elon Musk said, I was invited, but declined. Okay, so what would it mean that he's now going versus not going before? Well, it's still an opinion, but I think it's kind of a logical thing to consider that now they are going because now they're invested more. So, or they were trying to send a different message then. Spiro simply said, now he's speaking, people need to wake up. And I'll include this discussion in case you want to know more about the network state dynamic, which I think is the driving force around all of this. Bernie points out a conspiracy theory, another theory that isn't. DVLA databases will be used by councils to determine where and when drivers move in the UK, rationing car use to restrict movement within cities. That's interesting. That's like the whole smart city, 15-minute city, freedom city, charter network city. Same thing, by the way. That's the conversation they're having in the UK. Well, you know what brought that to mind? What came to my mind when I heard that? Oh, that's right. The current administration, rather the government, driven and supported by both sides of the paradigm, which is the real point. Federal law says new cars after 2026 must monitor drivers and shut down if the car disapproves, meaning the company, which is your new government now, we're being told. The new the elitist oligarch's going to win back the other. That's what they're telling you. The CEO-run country, that is the agenda. Your dashboard should not be the judge, jury, and executioner. Now, Massey's speaking out about this. Didn't matter. This is now happening. And the reality is that this is something that's been slowly growing. Now think Vault 7 and the idea around controlling those things. This is not new. The point now is to recognize it's all happening rapidly while you're being told it's all over, we won. Just like usual. I think that's the role Trump plays, just like last time. And it's all part of the same government agenda. Those right now trying to get you to look at one side or the other and only look there are more obvious than ever. And they're being called out by their own supporters right now. 1984 also adds this. This is from 9 hours ago. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, just entered America into the AI autonomous killing wartime footing, aiming to bypass all bureaucracy, civil rights, advanced AI autonomy, experimentation, and testing using Grok for digital kill chain execution with drones. This is from the 9th, and you can go over this. This is just what we all know is happening and coming. It's just building this out in real time with their AI control structure, with Israel involved, with their surveillance of everybody. This is the world we all are fighting. Every one of us, in fact. I mean, I shouldn't say it like that, but the larger group of people that are pushing back at the Great Reset, which was well beyond partisan lines, and many of them just didn't realize it was continuing. They thought we stopped the Democrats. It's all over. That's how the game works. Thanks to the big, beautiful bill, who championed that, we will have autonomous AI drone swarms building kill lists from social media, Grok, biometrics, Authentics. That is still a part of Twitter, by the way, despite what Elon said. That is Israeli intelligence, not connected to. It is Israeli intelligence of U.S. citizens armed with pre-crime technology. It's all right in front of you with Lavender. And he goes over more of the information. It's all broken down from what they recently put out. And he also points out this is an open door for Israel to spy on U.S. citizens. True, it's already happening, by the way. Unfettered access to our data for continuous tracking and behavioral experimentation. That is the memorandum of understanding they had with their artificial intelligence plan. If they're using everything that they have on you to train AI, and Israel has access to everything they're using to train their AI, it's not that hard to recognize they have access to everything the government has on you. It's right in plain text if you want to look it up. Autonomous AI kill machines in U.S. streets that were battle tested in Gaza, field office in Israel. Grok is confirmed to be in business with the Department of War, which we talked about this already. Grok, which was a DARPA program, already the government, became a partnership with the Department of War and is now spying, as well as the fact that integrated completely into you have to recognize I'm trying to go through this quickly, but recognize the breadth of this, how far this goes. And this means that you're not being managed by what you think you are at this point. Managed is the right word. And it's not about the government we think we have is a puppet, in my opinion. I mean, I think that's very clear. But Goes on to make all the same points we've been connecting to this. The reality of the R&D for this very platform being in Israel. I mean, come on, guys. It's like everything else. It's like Stardust Solutions. It's a Delaware company, except for literally every other part of it is run right out of Tel Aviv. That's not a joke, by the way. We've gone over that in a recent show. And of course, the joint statement of the memorandum of understanding, the joint statement of U.S. and Israel on the launch of strategic partnership on AI and research and critical technologies. And we, of course, we know Grok from the side of Twitter literally told us more than once, by the way, that it was suspended by the platform for accusing Israel of genocide. What we know, what we can prove is happening. You can ask it right now and it will tell you that, but it was briefly suspended for simply acknowledging that. They went over showing you who the war criminals were between Netanyahu and Khamenei, and it was telling you it was Netanyahu. I mean, it's not hard to see what they're trying to do and clearly what the evidence shows. So on top of that, Musk says, criticism is allowed. Debate is allowed. Free speech lives on Twitter. They just love to repeat these high-mighty sentiments that are completely fact-free. And he goes, yes. That's my point, by the way. This is probably an Elon bot for all we know, managing through his account. It's just, yes, correct, 100%, symbol, up sign, whatever. And it's just upvoting everything to give it 17 million views, whether you agree with it or not, whether anybody else does. That's what tends to happen. Point is, Elon LARPing as a free speech warrior is one of the most embarrassing parts of this timeline. We just talked about this. Grok is telling people when they ask, they're getting their visibility reduced by 65%. Why? Because they call out Israel's crimes. AIPAC can come out and give you a whole statement about things that are fact-free and actually proven to be false, and they will get boosted as proven by Grok. I'm sure this will get covered up or might have already been. It's all very clear. Daniel McAdams says it wasn't the Chinese that you hated about TikTok while speaking to Lindsey Graham. It was the free speech and ability to criticize your favorite country, Israel. Here's Lindsey Graham going, I'm so excited that we have TikTok back because now we've taken over remember how funny this was. They were all up in arms about the way the platform worked because it was influencing opinions. So the only thing they cared about who was controlling the influence machine, because now they can do that. Well, it's all great. It's all gravy now. We can just convince you of lies we want you to think of, and that's okay. Hashtag freedom. That's what they're all doing. The point is, it was Israel they were trying to censor for. That's where we are. Let's not forget that Ozturk, a PhD student, this has now come out even more, but I don't think we needed more. It was clear in the beginning, but more evidence is good. Deporting PhD students because they co-wrote an op-ed in their school, which was, if you read it, was simply going, they're committing genocide. That's, even if they're wrong, you're allowed to say that, but they weren't wrong. And it's inherently un-American, unconstitutional. Doing it because they criticized the one country that's sacred is extra repressive and revolting. But that's exactly what happened to Ozturk. That's Glenn Greenwald. Adam saying, here is the newly unsealed State Department memo confirming finally that the detention of tough student Ozturk was based on the op-ed alone. No anti-Semitic activity, no support for terrorism. That's just what they said. You see why this is relevant as they're calling Alex a terrorist right now? Even though we all know that's not the reality because you have eyes. This is important. This is insane. And this is barely talked about still. And this is what, they released this by force, really. But I mean, if you're already a criminal organization, why wouldn't you just burn it and say they don't have anything? That's why I often wonder why, because I think my mind is part of this, whatever it is trying to collapse what's happening in this country. I really believe that. Completely my opinion. Either way, they arrested her, tried to deport her, tried to send her to El Salvador. That was right in the beginning because she wrote an op-ed about Israel. Who do you think drove that? Probably Batar USA, which is where the information came from, through Israel. Chris Rosani points out, Massey votes against more government chains around our necks. He's called a grandstander and what do they call him? A loony. What do you say? I don't know. Called him psychotic. Trump did. Americans love their chains, he writes, as long as it's their guy fastening them. Now, look, I agree with that for a lot of people. I really want us to consider whether that might not be the majority of people. That's just the way our partisan narrative frames it for us, how our media, left and right and mainstream alternative frame it for us, because it's in their interest, especially if they're losing that control, to keep us thinking that. Now, I'm not going to deny, it's clear that there's a lot of people, possibly the majority, which would be quite depressing, of people that are okay with unconstitutional action as long as it's aimed at their enemies. But I really want us all to consider, and I genuinely think it's what I want you to consider, which is that not everybody actually thinks like that. And right now, more than ever, especially conservatives, because of what's happening, are standing up and taking a stand. And that's why the system is going double time to try to shout us back down and tell you, if you think this, you're alone and you're wrong and nobody's with you. They said the same thing during COVID and they were wrong. Thomas Massey says the Daily Caller is correct. Every House Republican but one, you know who that is, just voted to fund the liberals' favorite censorship agency, CISA, as they would call it. Now the Republicans are using it, as they always have, by the way. This is in the DHS bill. He said he's the one Republican who voted no, but he's the bad guy, right? I voted for the SAVE Act and support deporting illegals, which, by the way, I strongly disagree with in regard to the SAVE Act. And I would like to believe Massey knows how obvious that SAVE Act was meant to be something. It wasn't even about illegal immigrants. It was about specifically the real ID overlap of digital ID. So consider that right there is a good point to be made. But either way, I don't support online censorship, is what he says. So regardless of what you think, and we should be questioning him like we do all of them for things just like that. The point is he voted on this for what every Republican would actually want. But everyone on the America First fake patriot side clearly are okay with allowing this to happen. Okay with things like this, by the way. We already showed you this in the 1059 minibus bill. $5 billion in welfare for refugees, literally while they're still talking about Minnesota. And of course, they says, well, when we vote against this minibus containing $5 billion for welfare refugee, whatever you think about that's not the point right now. Some will say, why aren't you supporting the president? Think about how ridiculously Orwellian and like convoluted that is. And guess what? Here we are. It's not a joke. It's almost like the whole thing, you know, difference between theory and conspiracy theory or whatever, it's a week or whatever the narrative. It's like 30 seconds these days. Mike Benz, once again, Democrats vote 100% as a block, while a third of Republicans defect to Democrats. Why is it defect to Democrats? Well, what you're saying is they voted in the direction that you guys claimed we should before we got here. They voted against this because you're giving $5 billion to refugee programs while you just said you were fighting that. Or the discussion about the auto shutoff for cars. The reality here, guys, is that this is not about Democrats voting on your side. They're voting in their interest, which is what they all do. I don't believe they care about your rights. Right now, it's in their interest to project that. The point is that they voted against these things because they don't agree with what's happening. At least that's what they're saying. For them to frame it as they're now Democrats because they voted against the team, it shows you the whole problem. It's embarrassing. And here's Rand Paul and Massey saying that's what would happen when they voted against what Republicans would otherwise say we don't want. It's completely schizophrenic at the end of the day. Here's Thomas Massey. I hate to say I told you so. Guess what? Another example of the lie. This is just one. This is the bait and switch administration. This is about defunding the Department of Education. The reality is it was always a game. And what I want you to see in this is not left versus right, but rather that they play off each other to convince you they're battling while they ultimately keep going in the same direction. This is what we're really dealing with right now. And I believe many, if not most Americans, are finally starting to see that.
At the Department of Education, Trump abolished it, right? Well, actually, it would receive $78.7 billion in discretionary spending, not to mention the mandatory with the Pell Grants. Pretty much a tiny increase from Biden's levels, but roughly the same. So whatever happened to abolishing the Department of Education? I just don't get it. But this is where we are. It would prohibit the administration. It actually has a Democrat rider. It would prohibit the administration from transferring DOE funding to other agencies, which was his plan. And they got it.
Right. So you could simply argue this is them failing, right? That they just weren't crafty enough. The Democrats got them somehow, or some of them are rhinos, or that's usually what you get. And that may be the case. But it's in our interest to ask whether that was always the way it was going to go, that none of them really wanted that. And they might as well be in that back smoky room we talk about going, hey, look, I want them to think that I'm on this side and you need to project that side, right? So let's play this the right way. I think this even happens in foreign policy. I mean, I know it does, but who knows what is, when it's happening and when it's a possibility. Like with the Iran conversation and certain bombing locations, you wonder, maybe they got behind the scenes, even as adversaries, and said, look, let's taper this back down. It's in nobody's interest to take it this far. But as I say that, I'm like, well, Israel's entities in a lot of cases don't seem to care about the irrationality of what might happen, but you can understand how that might be the case. But think about this, so are they doing these things, or are they got us and we didn't get what we promised because they wouldn't let us? Well, in most cases, you guys are voting for the very things that allow that not to happen, or however you want to frame that, like we just saw with the bill and the funding for refugees. And don't watch as later in the administration, they blame Democrats for that very problem, or stupidly tell you it was from Biden before, even though it happened after this minute. They lie like they're breathing right now. And that's pretty common for politicians. But right now, from this administration, I think it's just incompetence and clumsy Jason Bassler says, Dear MAGA, government tracking is tyranny or government tracking is necessary. Which one is it? Can't be both, right? You can't claim the COVID tracking was unnecessary and illegal and unconstitutional and then be like, it's okay because now we can track you because immigration. The principle is what matters. And if all it takes is your personal narrative on top of something to get you to ignore the principle, then you have no principles. This is what I'm trying to show people. And this is our show we did on this. Trump's bait and switch administration now fully exposed, January 18th. We also talked about ICE's social credit score, which is on top of everything else we're dealing with, guys. Surveilling, you got Gotham, and you got Elite, and you got all sorts of other stuff we don't even know about. And they're using this to grade you, everybody. It's not secret. It's all very clearly proven. It's all justified under immigrants, like we talked about. Now, Jeff Carlson also says, from the left-right paradigm point, Trump and the GOP deserve to lose the midterms after he's pointing to Eric Dougherty discussing how the president has just endorsed Speaker Mike Johnson for re-election. You know, the guy that every conservative I know said was a rhino and they were not even considering because he would never be part of the team. He's not MAGA. He's not America First. And then just like that, he was the best guy in town because Trump picked him. Dishonest people, though. Plenty of conservatives were still like, oh, okay, that guy's terrible, but maybe Trump sees something I don't. That's what you tend to get. There's so many dishonest people in the paradigm. But so, Democrats, it says, deliver more MAGA wins, Mr. Speaker. Help save the midterms. This is my point. These kind of people with their flashy red light and they're just in breaking news for the thing you've seen 70 times already online are the same thing. And they are going to go, yes, that thing, whatever he told me to. I support the current thing. That's what they are. They're the Republican version of that. And the bottom line is, Mike Johnson he's like antithetical to everything you guys stand for, but it doesn't matter because he's the team. That's what we're dealing with. And that's the point. Carlson says they deserve to lose. That is, if you still think that the voting process is what we pretend it is, I think it's been stolen. Alex Zeck, a long time ago, both sides, says if you're trying to fit everyone and everything into a left-wing or right-wing box, your psyche has been captured. You cannot think outside of the paradigm that they've created for you, and that's exactly what those who wish to dominate and control want. I mean, it's really simple to grasp. Every side understands that. They just only seem to be able to see it in one part of the side, or one part of the discussion. Of the mind that most Americans exist outside of that paradigm right now. I could be wrong. They're playing the people against each other and to exploit, divide, and conquer. 100%. Now, he had a really insightful statement here that I want to play for you. That is, it goes a little bit more on the kind of metaphysical or spiritual side, if you will, about the idea of what this is doing to us and more of a personal mental health kind of mindset about what's going on. And I think it's worth hearing what he has to say.
We fail to consider how wild it is that over the past few years, there have been multiple examples of human beings being wrongfully killed, and then it's shared all over social media. And I said this with the Renee Good situation, and it's even more relevant now. It is wild that multiple people can watch the exact same videos from the exact same angles and come away with completely opposite interpretations based almost entirely on whether they're on political team red or political team blue. Nothing to do with principles, nothing to do with right or wrong, just pure political tribalism. And then, depending on the political leanings of the human being who was killed, other human beings either cheer for it and justify it or mourn it and protest it. And then, based on the political beliefs, people immediately run to social media to assert that their assessment of the videos are the only correct ones. No room for nuance, no room for discussion, nothing. That should disturb you, but it probably doesn't because it's been normalized at this point. And I just want to point something out. Irrespective of which political side you're on, more division leads to more civil unrest. More civil unrest leads to more justification for increased government policies, intervention, and control. And that power can be used by either side, regardless of who's in office. The tyranny you cheer for now because it's coming from your side will be used against you by the other side in the future. You can apply that to any point in history over the last few years, whether it's COVID or this situation. And lastly, here's something else I've been thinking about quite a bit. I don't think we're meant to constantly know every detail or be repeatedly exposed to traumatic imagery of things that aren't actually happening in our immediate surroundings. I don't think we were designed to absorb nonstop trauma from across the world through a screen. We take in this imagery, our nervous system responds with fight or flight, And then we're approaching our everyday lives as if what we just saw on our screens is what's going on in our immediate environment. And for most of us, it's not. And I'm not saying what happened in Minnesota didn't happen, but I am suggesting what I've said before. We really need to be mindful of how much what we consume on screens is impacting our beliefs, thoughts, feelings, words, and actions, and how much that is impacting how we approach the physical world around us and the impact we have on the physical world around us.
Well put, and I think it's really worth considering. Just completely independent of politics, like whether that there is a part for me that, like with what I do, where I recognize an exchange, where I know this is probably not in my best interest. I know this will probably have a negative effect on me, but it's important for me to do it in this way because of what I do. And maybe I'm wrong in that, but I think we all have those little rationalizations. But the larger point he's making is simply just that immersing yourself in this again, I would argue that there is some point at which it's important for us to know about it and report. But what he's kind of saying is just the day after day, 24-hour news cycle, just immersing yourself in every terrible thing happening. And look at the outrage story over there and look at what this guy did over there. And then using that to sort of blanket mindset anybody in the certain group and it's having an effect on people, very much so. And I think it's clearly by design. But just consider what he has to say. Take that to heart, right? Take a step back and ask yourself what is really important to you, and that's just a general point for anything we're discussing. Now, continuing on this, I want to read, True Street Media wrote on top of that, just the statement that he said, but to think about it, the tyranny you cheer for now because it's coming from your side will be used against you by the other side in the future. You can apply that to any point in history. Now, I would take a step back from that and argue that's the way we perceive it. But the reality of that is the government will take whatever you give them and use it against you any chance it gets. We may perceive that as one side versus the other, but the point is the government retains that power and it will use it against whatever side or whatever element or all sides that are, in the way of its agenda. I just think that's historically accurate. But Alex Zeck recently agreed to do some a kind of an article for TLAV. Just discussed it yesterday for basically about the two-party illusion and his awareness of what this all is today. I've just really appreciated his perspectives on that. So you can look forward to that. Now, let's talk about Renee Good, a couple updates before we get into Alex. And this is important to understand, obviously, because these stories are relevant and connected, but there's some additional parts to this that you're going to want to hear. And it's not only what we already know, which is that she was still alive when they refused to allow the medic to help, that ultimately all the shots came from essentially from the side back angle. Again, all this if you watch the video and aren't a dishonest person. And again, the best they could argue would be that she was trying to leave and that they shot at her because of that, because that's what it's devolved into. Well, she shouldn't be fleeing. And well, that's a crime to shoot her in the back or shoot anybody for fleeing in any circumstance, because the reality of the evidence shows you what they said was not true. And I'm not going to go through it all again. I quite frankly think this is just as obvious, but I'll include this show. The shooting of Renee Good was a breaking point. And I really do think that. I think right now, this is just the straw that broke the camel's back. Now, here is Vance pushing the whole warrant discussion. I'm not going to get into it all again and watch the clip. The point was they're now on top of this trying to argue that agents can now kick in your door if they have an administrative warrant, not one signed by a judge, but a warrant that they've issued through ICE because they claim there's a withholding or not withholding of removal, but a final, they have the right to remove the immigrant, right? The point is, and if you read the actual it's a memo they're using. That's it. And even the memo, when you read it, which contradicts their other materials as they're training people, it quite literally says the immigrant's home, right? If they do not open their door, and what they're using it for is going into anybody's home. They walk up to your front door and go, "We think you have an immigrant in there," and then you go, "I'm not letting you in." They then say, "I have a warrant for that person's arrest." Doesn't say where they're supposed to be or in this house. And they use that to claim they can kick your door in, and they're doing that. Nowhere is that legal. And every lawyer out there with any honest perspective, and I only say it like that because you're going to get the token one on Fox News or whatever else. But if you look at the massive body, if you read the actual law, if you understand the Constitution, these things are wrong. And then you got Noam and Bondi and all the rest of them coming out and just lying to you about it. That's what he's referring to here. Vance did the same thing. And this basically says nobody's talking about doing immigrant enforcement without a warrant. We're talking about different types of warrants. Well, yes, that is true, but you're talking about doing it with a warrant that then does not allow you to do what you're doing. He's playing games with people's minds. They know what they're doing. Justin Amash says, JD Vance isn't this stupid. So what he's doing here is deliberate and evil. I agree. You can say evil's too much, but I agree with what they're doing. You don't just need some kind of warrant to enter a home. You need a warrant from the judiciary, signed by a judge. He knows this. He knows they're breaking the law when they enter a home with an administrative warrant. Simple. He uses the phrase administrative law judges to mislead. See? Because what's happening is essentially ICE is giving themselves their own warrants. But at the end of the day, even then, their own memo makes that even clear that it has to be at the house of the person who they're going after. And so even their own memo, which even in and of itself is a violation of the Constitution, then they're misusing the memo. And this is what you get when you hire a bunch of up-jump bounty hunters and people that can't even read to send out there to initiate partisan-driven, hatred-driven enforcement, whatever you want to call it. You get people that don't know what they're doing, who drop guns and let their, accidentally shoot their guns, or any number of things that have led to where we are. An administrative warrant comes from the DHS, from them. They are writing their own warrants. Exactly what I said the last time we talked about this, which makes them no more valid under the Fourth Amendment than a random person wrote on a piece of paper, I can enter your home. He's right. Guys, at some point, hopefully we get beyond this partisan haze, people will look back and go, man, that was crazy. Clearly they're wrong. But in the midst of this, you get the people screaming over the top. FBI agent who tried to investigate ICE officer in shooting resigns. So I think this is very important to realize where we just came from. The FBI agent who was actually initiating the investigation resigned because they wouldn't let this happen. This just clearly, think about what's going on with Alex right now. If you haven't seen, they had a warrant, the local police, to go and investigate, and they refused to let them in. We'll get to that. This is from Renee Good. This just happened. An FBI agent who sought to investigate the federal immigration officer who shot 37-year-old Renee Good has resigned from the Bureau. The agent, her name's Tracy Mergen, left her job as a supervisor in the FBI's Minneapolis field office after Bureau leadership in Washington pressured her to discontinue a civil rights inquiry. As far as I could tell, there hasn't even been any level of a criminal investigation. And this is with Jonathan Ross, who we only know because he took his face mask down. That's why they cover their mask, while they're all doing it more so than ever. And even Noam chastised somebody in a public hearing or discussion when they mentioned his name. Like that's doxing somehow. Like they're just breaking people's minds with this stuff. According to one of the people, such inquiries are a common investigative step in these shootings. It's almost mandatory. Like when this happens, that's what Justin was just basically saying in other contexts, that there is always something. Basically, it's about the check and balance, right? So when this happens, there is an investigation because otherwise they're effectively investigating themselves. That's the idea. And it says senior Justice Department officials have repeatedly said there are no plans to follow the path normally taken in such situations and pursue an investigation into whether Mr. Ross, who fired multiple shots at Miss Good, had used excessive force. Federal investigators have also refused to cooperate with state and local prosecutors in Minnesota. Is this seeming like a pattern? Complicating any efforts they might take to open their own investigations. Why would they not be this is local police that happened in there. They would have every right to investigate states' rights, any number of overlaps. The idea that they've built this federal power into just always circumventing anything because national security or whatever thing they point to, it does not. The Constitution is the core point here. States' rights, they have a right to do this their own way. The federal government just doesn't get. Now, that's a little more complicated when it comes to this point. States' rights wouldn't normally be cited in this conversation, but I think it's important to consider that the federal government pushing its way over into everything that should normally be done from a state level would not. It just shows you where we're going, guys, whether it's state to federal enforcement or federal to global enforcement. That may be a stretch for some people, but it's where this ultimately starts. And I think what's important to recognize is that there is 100% a level at which the local police would be involved in this. Now, it says, instead of allowing Ms. Mergen to work with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minneapolis to investigate Mr. Ross, the Justice Department has decided to investigate Ms. Good and her partner, scrutinizing their possible ties to left-wing protest groups. So you have a killing of this woman, and everyone can see the reality of this, and yet you shut down investigation and instead investigate the person you just murdered? I mean, that shows you the kind of people we're dealing with here, which is uniquely disgusting. That decision prompted at least 6 senior prosecutors in the office to resign in protest. This is their people, guys. This is their administration. In a separate move, the Justice Department has opened an investigation into several elected Democrats in Minnesota in an effort to determine whether they may have conspired to impede the Trump administration and their efforts. Now, look, you could argue that's valid. In some cases, it may be. But in this investigation, instead of investigating what happened, you then go after her and her partner, literally punishing the partner of this woman. And then you start to initiate investigations into Democrats for efforts to impede, but under the guise of this moment. That's just so despicable. It kills me. And it says, as part of that inquiry, because you have to realize investigating that on its own, go for it. But to do that under the guise of this, and then use this to basically, they're not going in this direction, instead going investigating Democrats under the umbrella of this point. It makes it especially insulting. As part of that inquiry, the department issued subpoenas this week, as you might have seen, into Governor Walz, Mayor Frey, and Mayor Kaoli Her of St. Paul, among others. I mean, like I said last time, I think most of these people, if not all of them, because I think this of pretty much government in general, Walz in particular, are guilty of crimes. You can prove this in many ways if you get beyond the left-right paradigm and look at how they vote for supporting genocide or any number of things, or even go more local into their actual areas, like the fraud in this area that has been proven. 70 plus people have been put in jail, mostly under the Biden administration, by the way, because of this fraud. Now, what's interesting is that I'm willing to bet you anything that this goes one of two ways, that they either don't even show up and then nothing happens, sort of like we're going to see happen with the Clintons, mark my words, because it's all show and arguments and anger, and then nothing ever happens because they're all on the same side, or they do show up and it's meaningless and they refuse and they make comments and nothing. My point is, if you guys are telling us that they're criminal or they're fraud, they're committed fraud, and you claim that's an absolute, then why this should have been done already? Show us the evidence. Right now, what I'm going to get into, the argument is somehow that all of this, meaning I guess maybe the ICE reactionary shootings is somehow their instigated effort. I guess you could argue that somehow by them making them shoot them, I guess, but that's not what we can see happening. The point being that they're arguing it's all instigated to cover up fraud. Okay, fine. I wouldn't even disagree with that being possible. Where's the evidence? Okay, if you're telling me this is them covering up fraud, what fraud? Like, I'm not saying there's not fraud. What I'm saying is you guys have yet to prove anything you're pointing to. So why would they then need to instigate all this to cover up something that you're not even going after when you understand the reality of where we are? It's comically stupid. Moreover, the Justice Department has started cracking down on protesters who have opposed Trump in this effort. Which led to this point right now. This was before this, to the shooting of Alex. And another one, by the way. On Thursday, prosecutors filed conspiracy charges against 3 people who were involved in interrupting a church service. I found this interesting. After a protest in St. Paul to protest a pastor's apparent work as an ICE enforcement official. According to a criminal complaint, the 3 defendants, Armstrong, Allen, and Kelly, intimidated, harassed, and oppressed, terrorized the parishioners. It's such a gross embellishment, but there is a point to be made. But it says, on Friday, a pair of federal judges who oversaw the case denied requests to keep them in custody. It's just like everything they've done so far, the supposed terror plot on Halloween that ended up being basically nothing, and you tell me what's happened, or the false cases against Comey and all the rest. This was clearly time to deflect. Now, what I think is important is that if there's a crime, and let's say, like if they want to go back to the FACE Act or claim that they're intimidating people in religious context, you could decide that's the case, but this would never come to the level they're trying to push it to. They're arguing this is terrorism. They end up altering that woman's face to make it look like she's crying, and they share that on the White House account. I guess she was told that wouldn't even be shared. It's just crazy to me. And this is on top of the fact that you just murdered this woman, and now you just murdered Alex, and this is what you're focusing on? Yes. That really needs to be reflect on how crazy that is. Now, protest at Minnesota church service as the tensions over ICE tactics. This last part, then we'll get into Alex. This was on the 19th. Protesters interrupted a Sunday church service. This is what they're trying to, this is what they want you focused on in St. Paul, Minnesota. All in Minnesota, right? Why only there? Isn't there immigrant issues everywhere else in the country? Why is everybody focused in this one location? Doesn't that seem strange? Even if there is an issue to be focused on, are you telling me that you only have the power and the effort and the resources to focus on one town? It's just, doesn't that seem weird? Or is it the momentum or the political lens? They want you only focusing here, which probably both. Minnesota residents in the Trump administration after an immigration agent shot and killed Renee Good. Videos posted on social media show protesters chanting at the city's church, including calls for ICE out. Which, by the way, are we of the mind that protesting is illegal now? I know they're really trying to basically make that argument without saying it, but everyone has the right to protest. Now, private property matters, right? Even the FACE Act will point to there's relevance there, but it says, and bringing the service to a halt. Now, Did they do that, or is this how they're framing it? And then we'll get into the details here, but it says congregants are seen moving to leave the church as the chants continue and worship music begins to play. Now, look, I'm just going to say from a personal opinion, I don't see why this would make sense. What you're doing is going into, you're affecting all the other people in there trying to pray, trying to go to church, right? Why would you do that? And the reality is this guy does appear to have some kind of overlap with ICE. But is that illegal? No. So the protest makes sense in any context. If you decide you want to protest, you protest anywhere you want in a legal sense, in a public sidewalk, right? In this case, you went inside private property in a church and you did disrupt this. I think that's valid to point out if this was being discussed as something benign like that. The reality is they've turned this into borderline terrorism. That's what they're trying to do. So, but it's worth being objective about this. And I want to point out that their actions drive people to make more radical action, which I straight up think is by design. You basically instigate people into doing things because they then rationalize that when you're fighting an illegitimate force who's acting illegally, then, well, your only option is to fight back. No, I disagree with that. I mean, you can make your own choices. I think it's self-evident they're trying to drive people into taking action that they can point to. This has been a long time they've been doing this. Both sides, basically the government to anybody. They do it in foreign policy situations, right? They create chaos and they point to the chaos to justify their action. They're doing it to you. So when you went into the church, and it does appear to be just they're protesters, recognize that that's not the way that would go down. Why would you go disrupt everybody else? So think about these things. Don't fall for the trap, right? If that's what this was. Maybe these are paid agitators. That could be considered as well. But I think evidence matters. And as far as I can tell, they're just people that protest in a coordinated fashion, which happens everywhere in this country. The church protest over the weekend was organized by Nikema Levy-Armstrong, a civil rights lawyer. She said she wanted to draw attention to a church leader. And you can look into this for yourself. It does appear to be the case. David Easterwood, who also appears to be the acting director of ICE's field office for enforcement and removal operations. Okay, so he's not just a pastor. And it's not just, other than that, it is praying. It doesn't matter. It is church service. He is a pastor. So that doesn't then reflect on everybody underneath him. And he wouldn't give you the right to just disrupt everybody. But that is pretty interesting, isn't it? And I find it interesting how they don't really include that part of the conversation. You think they would because they would go defend ICE, right? But they don't want you to recognize that. I find that a strange overlap. And it says he was named in a lawsuit challenging aggressive enforcement tactics. So he's technically actually a part of this lawsuit. That does matter, but it doesn't change the reality of them intruding into this room. The Justice Department said it was investigating the event, with officials pointing to a 1994 law, think about that bars using or threatening force or physical obstruction, which apparently is the only way they can do this, to interfere or intimidate someone worshiping in a religious institution. So it would be interfering with physical obstruction. But let's think about how desperate it is to go back to a 1994 law to try to frame that they're doing something which the law doesn't even make. What you're claiming they're doing is not even what the law overlaps with. This is them obtruding, obstructing in the religious practice. Fair. That does apply. But it's not terrorism, and it's sure as hell not some Antifa organized Democrat, deep state, whatever they're trying to call it. Attorney General Pam Bondi, who said that she spoke with a pastor at the church late Sunday, said attacks against law enforcement and intimidation of Christians are being met with the full force of the federal law. Right. Throw a sandwich at somebody, you're going down. You work with Epstein and sell children, we'll ignore it because, that's what we do. Intimidation of Christians, this is a desperate effort to tie this into something your people support. Guess what? They're also Christians. So you guys are ridiculous. But of course, that's what they do, right? You're protesting Israel's crimes. You must hate Jews. This is what they do, guys. It's not, of course, consider everything, but facts matter. Miss Levy-Armstrong, the church protester organizer, said that in the lawsuit filed earlier this month against ISIS tactics, which, by the way, are objectively wrong, illegal. They're breaking the law everywhere, not every one of them all the time, but it's objectively clear that it's happening at an overwhelming degree. So that matters. People want to stop this. She saw that Mr. Easterwood was named as a defendant for overseeing a racial profiling campaign of massive scale with devastating consequences and connected him with the church. She compared Mr. Eastwood's appearance in an October news conference alongside Homeland Security Kristi Noem with a sermon he delivered at a church that was posted to YouTube. And which he has a right to think and do what he wants, guys. Says Miss Levy-Armstrong and she circulated her plan for interrupting the service on social media as a way to raise awareness. So I disagree with that, right? You don't need to disrupt other people's lives, but you see, this is how they're starting to rationalize it, even from a basic level, that we need to do this to draw attention. I just think we need to think better of these things. Do it outside. Do it in other places. Do it in front of his home on a public sidewalk. Those things are legal if you knew where he was and didn't post his personal information. The point would be that you don't need to do this in a church to disrupt what they're doing. And it goes on to say, to have someone in that role as a pastor also being in that role as an overseer is unconscionable, in her opinion. And I do agree that's weird. She said that Jesus called out religious leaders for their hypocrisy. Yes. And that's part of our duty as Christians. Of course, they don't care about that. I found that interesting and relevant. What about you? Now, this was interesting. Asking Grok, was there any official investigation after the killing of Renee Good, right? So we're talking about this being, the way they're framing this is so insulting. Now, the reality of this, even the way this asked, yes, there was an investigation, but here's what it says. The FBI briefly opened a civil rights investigation into ISIS actions. There are reports of federal involvement, but it faced controversy. Some sources indicate the Trump administration pushed to redirect or shut it down. And instead probe Good for possible liability, which is actually what happened. A judge reportedly refused an FBI warrant for that exact thing. So that's real. This led to resignations, including the FBI involvement. We just talked about that, right? Well, just to clarify, so only a very brief investigation that was ultimately shut down and not concluded. Is that it? Based on available reports, yes. Now, really absorb that. We're talking about the fact that we're a killing of a U.S. citizen in broad daylight. That's Renee Good. And not only did they not do a civil investigation that barely started and shut down, and that's why that person resigned, but they have not even done any sort of a criminal investigation whatsoever. I'm pretty sure that's required. Isn't that standard operating procedure, especially with a shooting? And we always heard and talked about this. There's a required investigation, but apparently not now. I just find that to be so insulting. Guys, this is a changing of our reality. They're driving it. Now, really, I would argue in many ways, this is the coming to awareness of where we've been for a long time, but now just being proven to you in very difficult ways to understand or difficult ways to accept, because it is where we've been, right? Now, I found this interesting. This is a clip that I'm going to use to roll this into the conversation of Alex and where we are. Catherine Austin Fitz said this in an interview we had. What I find interesting is I'll point to quickly, Shadow of Ezra, which is, pretty much a partisan account, shared this, and of course they never give links to our information. And what's important to me is not me, but rather that if you go to the actual article, you can find all of the source material to everything we reference, which I think is the most important part. But I'm still glad that it's getting some share, because listen to what she has to say. I think this is relevant. And it also shows you that conservatives, partisans, are very much starting to question the big picture. And I love to see that. Then you're going to love to see what Grok said when somebody asked who this was. Guess what? They didn't say me, but let's watch this first.
Let me show you how the game works.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I live an hour outside of Memphis, and Memphis has an absolutely horrible crime problem.
Mm-hmm.
And they've had a district attorney, I'm told, who basically let the criminals run free. Okay. Now, we know the criminals running free, to the extent they're doing narcotics trafficking or sex slave trafficking, it's not those criminals who are making all the money. The money's going upstairs, right?
Right.
Because you can't transact a dime in this financial system. It's all controlled by the banks. Okay. So the money's going upstairs. But anyway, so we have a DA who would prosecute. There's a wonderful senator from this area who's been trying to get that DA impeached, because what do you need? The crime rate is way too high in Memphis. Okay. And it's hurting property owners. It's hurting citizens. It's killing tourism. It's just bad. So, but what do you need? You need a non-Soros finance DA. You need a real DA who's prosecuting crime.
Right.
And
let's not forget the Dissent and the Soros connections there, which are very relevant. That it's important. It's not always one side. Not that that's important for what she's saying, but I do think it's important for the bigger two-party illusion point, which actually is what this is about.
And not permitting crime to happen in the city. That's your solution. Okay. Now, hold that thought, because this is the ping pong of the uniparty. So we got one side of the uniparty promoting this, sort of allowing crime to ravage Memphis. So in comes Trump. And if you look at what happened in Chicago, Trump is basically saying, okay, well, ICE is going to drop in and round up people without warrants or evidence, and including U.S. citizens and their kids, and confiscate property freely. Now, why would ICE do that? ICE would do that because if you get pushback against ICE, it gives the president authority to drop in the military, right?
Correct.
He's allowed to drop in military to protect ICE and ICE facilities, right?
Is he though? Well, I'll come back to that though. Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm not going to play that on this clip, but we talk about this, and we both. I mean, the reality of this is she's doing this to make a point, as you kind of hear right here. But if you understand this point, like the legality here, just the ICE is just that's like saying you can deploy the military to protect the police force. It's not true. She was saying that this is what their rationale is. That's what they're claiming. The point, though, is that the legalities of this. There are some exceptions, posse comitatus, when it comes to National Guard and different state points, but they've violated these every which way possible. Military deployment, National Guard from different states. What they're doing is illegal. You can yell national security and maybe even in a court argue that legally stands because we've, bastardized the reality of the Constitution to meet national security. But that wouldn't make it constitutional when you understand the reality of the Constitution. And I argue that judges' only job is to enforce the Constitution, not give them loopholes away from the only thing that keeps them checked and balanced, if that's even where we are.
Okay, well, let's just assume,
And I want to reiterate, as someone's commenting, we get into this later. Please watch the full episode because we basically agree. Well, I'll come back to that, though. Go ahead.
Okay, well, let's just assume, he can have standing. What he doesn't have standing to do is drop in the National Guard or the military to deal with local crime.
Right.
That's the mayor's job, the police job. Okay. But if he can cook up a pushback against ICE, now, somebody said, oh, well, look at what ICE did, in Portland, in June. And my attitude was, really, who financed it? Okay. This is a theater. And you've got, so I was having a debate with somebody from Memphis the other day. No, they were from the other side of Tennessee, but we're talking about Memphis. And they said, I would be happy for the president to drop military into Memphis to stop crime. Okay. And I said, pointing to what happened in Chicago, what about the rights of the people in Memphis? And she said, they have no rights until they're in prison. Okay. Now, what this does is say no warrants, no due process, no effort to determine whether somebody's a citizen or an immigrant. Right. Okay. So let's talk about the precedent. What we're saying is I can arrest somebody with no warrant. I can, if you look at what's going on in California, I can hold them for 37 days at great expense of the taxpayer with no warrant and no identification.
The expense is super important, right? Aren't we supposed to be cutting costs? Well, apparently now that doesn't matter, including spending more than ever, as long as we, justify it for the need of immigration. At some point there has to be some kind of moral and logical consistency here, but not right now.
And no due process. So no evidence, no warrant, no due process, right? And I can put them in prison. And the basis upon which I can do this is because I say they're a domestic terrorist.
Right.
So if I say you're let's say you have 100 acres of farmland I want for my data center.
Oh, good point.
I just say you're a terrorist, and then no warrant, no due process. I can go arrest you, put you in prison, and confiscate your property, all because I say you're a terrorist. Right? We're talking the plunder game.
Telling you guys, this is being shared by major conservatives right now. They're all starting to recognize, because you know what? It's not that hard to digest. It's the same thing we were all fighting. They're just not used to, or haven't been, some of them, seeing it in the lens of this is currently happening through this administration. But there's no missing it if you just are objective, if you just stand back and look at the facts. And I don't mean the debatable, whatever we argue, you look at the objective reality where we are, that even the other side's pointing to, it just is framed differently, and understand what's really driving it. So I recommend you check out this interview. And I get a sense of why it might not have been shared because of the title and what the image looks like. Now, Catherine and I were discussing this, and the whole point was about one of the things that came out in the interview was what she was discussing, and her claim, which is that she argues Trump is the most anti-capitalist president in U.S. history. I'm sure people disagree with that, but if you listen to her points and you listen to the reality of it, what she did with TikTok or NVIDIA or any number of examples, it's exactly, if Biden had done it, it would have been called socialism. Catherine Austin Fitts, reverse Robin Hood. Why has Trump become anti-capitalist? I think it's a really important thing to consider. So the major point, though, is about driving us into this position. And what are they doing? Calling people terrorists who are simply just present. Because, and the AI point, think about that. Didn't they just say that the one they're talking about in Gaza was the size of Manhattan? Like, think about what they're doing and what necessitates that. Then they're going to steal property. I mean, this is the network state overlap. That is a part of that agenda, funded and driven by the same people and the same groups with the same outcome, with digital IDs and digital tokens and digital money. And it's the same conversation. Now, this person asks Grok, what podcast is this from? It says, this is a clip from Catherine Austin Fitz's interview with Greg Hunter on USA Watchdog, which she does often, discussing government tactics and local crime issues. That's not even what we were actually discussing. I mean, you have to understand, guys, that's not a mistake. I mean, it certainly could be, but are we really going to pretend that Grok with its AI monstrous overlapping database is going to say, that looks like, what are you? One, you can see my logo, you can see me, you can see the fact that we're not talking about that. I mean, it just kills me. I was just talking about this with Derek, by the way. He goes on Jimmy Dore's show, who knows me, and calls it the Vanguard. He goes on Redacted, who we have overlap with, and they call it the last Vagabond. There's some kind of a conspiracy here, I'm kind of joking, to just not discuss this platform. I think we know why, if that is what's happening. But in any case, I said, of course you misreport this. Are you not allowed to say it's the last American Vagabond? And it says, thanks for the correction. Upon verification, this clip is from October and your interview. Oops, we just figured that out, and then gives the YouTube link, of course. And I gave the normal link, and I go, oh, thanks for the link. I just think that's hilarious. It could, who knows, just be a glitch. But this one was funny too. This person responded too before I did and said, no, Grok, this is clearly the last American Vagabond. I'm sure you can see the top right watermark. Is he blacklisted? And they go, thanks for the correction. Upon reviewing, this clip is from an interview with Last American Vagabond. So realize this post was before I asked, and it was wrong. Think of the point is that this Grok is supposed to be learning, right? But yet you can ask again separately, which I've done this myself, and it will give you the same broken answer. That tells me that there's some kind of a coordinated thing going on. But it says, sorry for the mix-up. No, he's not blacklisted. It was just an error in sourcing. Check their site for full episodes. Now, when I clicked this earlier, it wouldn't load, but I last checked a second ago and it did. Just took a really long time. There we go. But it says, how did you error in sourcing specifically occur? Here's what it says. The error happened because my initial search pulled up similar discussions by Catherine Austin Fitz, which that wasn't what we were discussing. And it says, leading to a misattribution. I didn't spot the TLAV watermark in the clip until reviewing it closely. Or the fact that we look different, or that it's a different, come on. I just don't believe for a second that was a whoopsie mistake, but of course I could be wrong. And it could be something that Grok and these AI, they don't even realize. There's like somebody, it's a black spot. There's something that's being, it's not, there's something put there algorithmically, so they don't even notice that, or something like that. Or it just misattributed. Also possible too. But check this conversation out, because I'm telling you, there's a lot more in there like this. And the point, going back to the actual post from Shadow of Ezra, is that this is a huge account that's sharing this to a largely Republican audience, and it's getting a lot of reach. Of course, not when I share it, of course, but it's important to recognize that this is highlighting what we're discussing, the two-party illusion, the problem reaction solution of bringing in immigrants, of using that problem to justify ICE crackdown, to then create conflict, which you use to justify ICE's actions. Then you call everybody terrorists, and you take what you want. I mean, this is a classic recipe, guys. Now, David Icke highlighting, I'm glad to see, high-impact flicks. And this is when Trump was speaking at Davos. And this was about him for a lot of different things. He covers 15 minutes. He covers the points that we've talked about and more. Check out Brian. He's always doing great work. And the point of him saying he claims the COVID shot, it was the best thing ever, and Operation Warp Speed was amazing, still says that. How are people okay with this out of control evil? David Icke says the sequence is simple. You tell people your ICE thugs are only targeting illegal immigrants, but then you ever expand your tyranny to include legal migrants and U.S. citizens, which is where we are. It's so blatant, and it's only just begun. You're watching Trump's Gestapo imposing fascism, and if you think it couldn't ever happen everywhere, just remember COVID. Exactly. Jason points this meme out, which I think is relevant. First president dropped 8 bombs in 8 countries in 1 year. Didn't really care that much, right? Epstein files still sealed, 0 arrests. No. I'm talking about the team sport players, obviously. Protesters exist in a different area code, and it's like, well, okay, yes, there is coordination. That has to be acknowledged. Like, there are political manipulations taking place through organized protesting. Yes. Doesn't invalidate somebody like with January 6th. I think even conservatives are able to recognize that was something that was being done, right? There was a manipulation. But does that then mean that every conservative that just happened to be there was suddenly illegal? No, right? And you guys argued that. So the same point has to apply. If you have protesters out there, even if it's a Soros-funded whatever, which is a valid point to be made, doesn't mean that everybody there is part of that, or that people are just, or even if they are, that they have negative intentions, or that they're doing something illegal. All of that matters. Consider those things, but we have to verify, prove, facts matter. Protesters do travel for things, especially when it's a national problem. But consider both. Be objective. Don't fall for things. And then, of course, Jason points out, this is so important. This is where they just proved this after Renee Good. This got covered by everybody. ICE tells legal observer, which is somebody there protesting or filming, legally allowed to do it, whatever you think about it. We have a nice little database, and now you're considered a domestic terrorist. So we just talked about, right? So, and he said this, it went around, and I've seen actually more than one video like this. And so they're taking your photograph. If you happen to be standing there doing something legal, but it bothers them because when you do that, it makes it harder for them to get away with their crimes. Then they put you on a list and they say, now you're a terrorist. Even if he was just trying to threaten or scare her, that's insane. And it shows you where we actually are. It's spin the dynamic around to consider that was a Biden official saying that to you. It has to matter regardless. And he goes, and poof, just like that, your rights are gone. Now we have a confirmation that Palantir database we warned about is real, active, and labeling Americans as domestic terrorists. It couldn't happen here, y'all. Yeah, well, here it is. Now let's get into Alex. Even from people that I know who are very adamant on one side of the paradigm are not okay with this. And I think that's a point that's personal and you don't know who I'm talking about, but nonetheless, consider that in your own life and recognize in my experience right now, people across the board are outraged about this, even more than Renee Good, probably because it compounds after what just happened, but because this is actually far more obvious, if that's even possible. What we know about Alex Pretti. The man shot dead by federal agents. Now, if there's a different pronunciation going around, please let me know to be respectful, but I couldn't find anything about how it would be pronounced. I doubt it would be Pretti. So Pretti probably is accurate, but let me know if you guys have a different pronunciation. The parents of Alex Jeffrey Pretti, who was shot dead by U.S. Border Patrol officer in Minneapolis Saturday, this was yesterday, issued a written statement decrying top Trump administration officials who suggested their son was a domestic terrorist. Now, really think about that framing. Even with Renee Good, it should have blown your mind that they would go that route immediately. Seeing as how there is a definition that would go along with these things, even if it's broad, which is what it always is for the way they use it, to think that would apply to somebody, even if what they did was what they claimed, is so far over the top. And it's just the reactionary go-to from people that aren't smart enough to realize they shouldn't rush right into that. Like Noam, like Bondi, like the entire administration, because it shows you something, guys. Shouldn't there be an investigation before you level a term? Yeah, there really should, but they don't care about that. And they don't even care about having an investigation. So Alex was an intensive care nurse at a VA hospital. There's a video going around that I will play for you that I think is somewhat relevant because of what he says, and not just, I try to avoid the, here he is doing a nice thing, or because, it matters. Everything matters. But showing you, like, here he is doing a bad thing doesn't then mean he justified, or killing him was justified, or means that we should think twice. That stuff floods the conversation. And it's the same point for the good stuff, right? Just because he's out there doing all the great things you can see on the video doesn't mean he couldn't have done what they claim. It's about being objective and rational in these points, like we did with the Israel ongoing genocide conversation, with plenty of difficult conversations. You just have to put your head down and be rational when everyone's being emotional. Now, but the fact that he was at VA, his whole background completely challenges. That's one of the valid reasons to point out that he was any kind of a terrorist, let alone a criminal, which he was not, according to everything you have on him. His background, there is no engagement. So even to argue he just decided to become a domestic terrorist, which would mean something official and legal, and it's insane. And it should insult everybody when you know that they're simply spitting that out to cover what they did. Was an avid outdoorsman who enjoyed getting in adventures with his dog, who recently passed away. He worked with the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs and had participated in protests following January 7th killing of Renee Good by an immigration and customs officer. So right there, plenty of people will then go, we knew it, organized, but you have to understand, and that would be stupid. Even if it is the case, that wouldn't prove that. The reality being that people are organized in fighting back what this is. I keep saying, if you care to look for yourself, go to one of these locations and talk to people. You'll find very quickly that it is a lot of people on all sides of the paradigm. Mostly people that are aware of it all being ridiculous, but you will find conservatives more than ever today. And I would imagine it's probably slanted more to the left because people are afraid of being seen or losing their group or whatever it is. But I'm telling you guys, this is not hard to see. And he is protesting this, or was, because by the stated information we have, I can't speak to his mindset, he didn't agree with these things. Quote, he cared about people deeply, and he was very upset that what was happening in Minneapolis and throughout the United States with ICE, as millions of other people are upset. Now, you could use this very point to argue that that's why he went out there and was being for, well, we're going to go through the video. We're going to go through the evidence you can see, and you can prove this stuff for yourself. So it can't be all emotional, narrative-driven discussion. The reality is you can see what happened, and it's not what they claimed. And the point is that people are now acting differently, though, because what they're doing is criminal. Now, I'm never advocating for violent reaction. And I'm even making clear to tell people, this might happen. But isn't that the point? To scare you away from standing up for your rights because they're acting illegally. I frankly think that's a large part of this. But, more so, to be honest, today with this one, I feel like this was largely negligence. And that's also a huge part of this. But it's the cover-up that ensues that shows you what they really are, right? You got to stand up for your rights, guys. That has to matter today. Now, you can decide how you do that. That's what I'm doing right now. And I go to protests. I go to these things if and when I choose to. And I wouldn't shy away from it because of something like this. But you need to consider, as this article and this stuff will go into, that this might happen. His family warned him, don't be careful. We'll go into this article because of this very moment. Pretti was a U.S. citizen, born in Illinois. Like Good, court records showed he had no criminal record, and his family said he had never had any interactions with law enforcement beyond a handful of traffic tickets. But according to this administration, that means you can be deported, apparently. In a recent conversation with their son, his parents, who live in Colorado, told him to be careful when protesting. Quote, we had this discussion with him 2 weeks ago or so. That go ahead and protest, but do not engage. Do not do anything stupid, basically. And you realize what we're going to show you is what he was doing. He was filming. He was being passive until that situation became, we'll get into the spraying of the person and him, and the reaction to that, and then what ensued. I mean, you just have to realize that, I want to reiterate, I think personally, and again, it has to be a personal choice because of the risks, it's never been more important to legally stand up for your rights. And I mean, look, there's a point at which legally means nothing when you're dealing with an illegal institution, but I would still argue that's in your interest to do so for obvious reasons. To make sure it's the same kind of point you'd make in a foreign policy point to say, so they did this illegal thing, so going and doing it back because it's justified? No, that makes you just as bad as them. Whether it's white phosphorus, whether it's bombing civilians, show the world that you're not the same thing by doing the right thing. Go out there and do it the way that we know it should be done to show the contrast. But again, each of you have to make your own decisions. Continues, the Department of Homeland Security said the man was shot after he approached Border Patrol, which we'll go over the video, with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun, the reality of which he did have, which he legally is allowed to have in every way that was happening, and that didn't even come into play until after they had tackled him. And an officer pulled the gun, and they let it go. They ultimately dropped it, or they ultimately fired it by accident. However that played out, we'll let you decide for yourself. They shot him unarmed on the ground because of that. This was not in his hand. It's disgusting. And each one of them have come out and yelled the narrative. He came at us with a gun, which they say with it, but they're going to probably later argue we just meant he had it on him, but that's not what they're saying. And that's not how it's being taken by all the people repeating their narrative. In bystander videos, and it says officials did not specify he brandished the gun, meaning take it out. In bystander videos of the shooting that emerged soon after, Pretti is seen with a phone in his hand, but none appear to show him with a visible weapon. It says family members with Pretti said he owned a handgun and had a permit to carry a concealed handgun. So everything was legal. I also think it's worth pointing out, this is a Democrat, right? So these ridiculous framings that we have about one side or the other, they're all manipulations, guys. Yes, there are slants. But I mean, are we supposed to pretend whatever it is he automatically a terrorist because he's a Democrat with a gun, which is what some people are saying now, showing you that they have no principles? Or is it ultimately that it's left and right people own guns, people wear masks, people, it's not unique to one side, but they always use these things to frame it a certain way. Family members said he owned it, but he had never been known to carry it in the past. Now, I argue that's probably why he was, because of the way it's going right now. Doesn't make it a crime to bring it to a protest or anywhere else. It's a legal concealed carry permit. There are specific limitations in some cases, banks, depending on the policy. In some cases, things, government buildings, I think in all cases, but this was not one of them. It says, I can't get any information from anybody, Michael Pretti said Saturday. The police, they said, it's called the Border Patrol. This is his father. Border Patrol closed. The hospitals won't answer my question. Think about how disgusting this is. They won't even respond. He didn't even know what happened to his son. They had to see a video on TV of their son to recognize that it was likely him, and they couldn't get anybody to respond to him. As of Saturday evening, the end of the day, the family said they still had not heard from anyone at federal law enforcement about their son's death. They're cowards. Because historically, that is something that takes place. Some process finds out and relays that information. That's usually what you see. Well, we can't say anything until the family's been notified. They don't even care, guys. And this is not normal. It's the same criminal government and same criminal institutions, in my opinion. But at least in the past, there was some level of process, it seems. At this point, with the way they've turned this around, I think it's meant to destabilize and collapse basically everything personally. But either way you look at it, that's grotesque. After seeing videos of top Trump administration officials suggesting that their son was a domestic terrorist who attacked an officer and shot him, they issued a written statement describing themselves as both heartbroken and angry. The sickening lies told about our son, they say, by the administration are reprehensible and disgusting. The family's statement said, they added that videos showed Alex Pretti was not holding a gun when he was attacked by federal agents, so they lied, but holding a phone with one hand while using the other to shield the woman who was being pepper sprayed. He also got sprayed. And you have to consider that, by the way, that ultimately he got sprayed in the face, which clearly caused adding to the confusion. So at this point, before he even gets tackled, he's sprayed with pepper spray. Then he gets tackled. He doesn't even know what's going on, most likely, because he probably can't see. And that's when it all ensues. We'll go through it. Please get the truth out about our son. He was a good man, they said. Alex Pretti grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where he played football, basketball, ran for track. He was a Boy Scout, sang in the Green Bay Boys Choir, right? Which, is reporting, but like I said, that doesn't mean you can't go out there and do something wrong. But the evidence shows what actually happened. After graduation, he went to the University of Minnesota, graduated in 2011 with a bachelor's degree in biology, society, and the environment, according to his family. He worked as a research scientist before returning to school to become a registered nurse. She said Pretti got a permit to carry a concealed firearm about 3 years ago, and that he owned at least one semi-automatic handgun when they separated. His neighbors knew he had guns. He'd occasionally take a rifle to shoot at a gun range. Oh, doesn't that make him a terrorist, according to the Halloween plot they claimed? Well, they went and shot at the range, but they were Muslims, so they must be terrorists. Guys, there's a reason all this is falling apart. They're whether it's pure incompetence, and I think it's part of that, or just that they're trying to feign action for support, which I do think is largely what's driving this. They're not going anywhere. In this case, this is just kind of overlapping with previous examples. By this logic, with what they did before, these people would be investigated for terrorism. This is supposed to be the conservative side supporting the Second Amendment. We'll do a whole point on that in a second. Now, remember, where was it? Oh, I just forgot what it was. Well, in any case, we're going to go through this more. There's plenty more to get to. But this is just the general overlapping. But this is France 24. And so, he ultimately had that. And I think it's important to consider that by him having it there, which I think seemed uncharacteristic, that, they're arguing that he was a terrorist because he brought a gun. I mean, again, the idea, this is coming from the Republican side of the conversation. Now, as Bread and Circus points out, Alex Pretti was a U.S. citizen. He had no criminal history and a legal permit to carry firearms. He was shot 10 times. 10 times after a masked federal agent had already disarmed him, which we'll show you. There is simply no defending this action in good faith. He needs to be charged. And he's referring to the shooting. 10 times, guys. And here's the article. Read it for yourself. So here's the first video we're going to look at. David Icke shared this. VA nurse murdered by Trump's demonic Gestapo for trying to stop women being attacked by the Trump's thugs, which, by the way, was unjustified. It says psychopath Trump and psychopath Stephen Miller say he was a would-be assassin. We'll go into that. And they're being fact-checked by Twitter. People up from the highest levels of their conversation are calling him out. Trump is a front man, a mental and physically dismantled gopher for pure evil. That's what David frames it as. Here is malcontent news. No weapon and no approach. Cell phone in one hand, hands up in compliance. Tackled, legally owned gun removed by federal agent while he was face down on his stomach, shot at point blank range in the back. Not hard to see. Here's the clip. Okay, so you got to see just the start. He's right there. Okay, he's got the girl in his arm. Okay, see, now he puts his phone in his hand. Then they push this woman for discern. I can't see any reason, but it's who knows. For me, from my perspective, there doesn't seem to be anything that justified him pushing this woman. Just he pushes her on the ground, which you're a big, tough, armed police officer or ICE agent, rather, who has to shove an unarmed woman on the ground because what? She insulted you? It's I mean, who knows? But you rationalize that. Then he walks up. He gets sprayed in the face for stepping in between them, which, again, let's understand here. There is not a legal process happening here. Nobody's being arrested. This is a person, which police officers and anybody else are accountable to their actions just like anybody, guys. He did something to this woman. That's assault, if you want to break it down. And then he steps in between them. It's all very clear. Let's play it again. Then he gets sprayed in the face. Right? So let's understand. And I think what we have to understand is that at this point, have you ever been sprayed in the face before with what they're using? Well, we can only assume it's normal bear spray, pepper spray, whatever they're using. Assume is a big one because of what they're using elsewhere, that who knows? We won't play it again. Now watch. Think about that as he goes down. He's blinded at this point. Look at that. Overreaction. Still spraying him, by the way. While his hands are up, he's bending over. That's anger, guys. That's untrained anger. Okay. So now he's on the ground. And now they begin to start trying to arrest him. Like, okay, so this is the point. You're not resisting arrest if there's not been a legal process engaged. No one says, hey, you're under arrest. No one says you broke the law. This is a reaction to being sprayed in the face, and then they all rush in there because that's what they're trained to do. We're going to get closer examples of it too. I'm going to show you every part of it. I think it's worth seeing the largest. What is there, 7 people involved at this point? Agents? For one unarmed guy? I mean, technically speaking, unarmed since it's not in his hand. The idea that there was a gun in his belt, which he's legally allowed to carry, they don't know that at this point until they see it on his side. Right there, I believe, is where the guy in the back, I'll show you in a second, pulls the gun out. I'll show it to you very clearly. I mean, look at these guys all piling in. Like one guy's got his hands on the back of another agent. Guys, there's just no process to this. They don't know what they're doing. If you're behind could have very well caused him to react that way. But listen, this keeps freezing for some reason. Of course it's freezing. Oh, come on. Are you kidding me? Hold on a second. There's literally no reason that should be freezing right now. As usual. So that guy literally runs out. See that gun in his hand? Now, that's not even what we're talking about. Okay, so first and foremost, I think it's important to see how that started, right? That this ultimately is a guy with nothing in his hand but his phone in a place where he's legally allowed to have what he has and they don't know about it. They spray him in the face as he simply tries to say, whoa, like steps. You can see it clearly. He steps in, goes like pins up, and he just goes to town and starts spraying him in the face. Now, if you want to make some kind of case about impeding or whatever you're talking about, there has to be something functionally happening. You're not impeding just because you're present when they're doing something. There's not an action. That woman wasn't under arrest. There was no fun. There was no, he wasn't being charged with something. He wasn't being accused of anything. It was a reaction. At some level, these people have to be accountable for their illegitimate action. And here he is. An assassin tried to murder a federal agent. We'll come back to this. And of course, here's even Twitter. No evidence has been released supporting the allegations of an assassination attempt. These guys are just bombastic. That's what their job is, apparently, destroying this country. So here's Adam Cochran, again, doing just a frame-by-frame breakdown so you can see it. I'll play the actual clip too. But what you can see is the time frame of all of this. ICE had already disarmed the man before shooting. This has been forensically proven, guys. It says the man never drew his gun. Okay, they're the ones that took it out of the holster. Think about that. At 15 seconds, one of the agents begins to pistol whip the man in the head, showing the orientation of the man's body and how his hands were nowhere near his waist. At 13 seconds, we see the man is on his knees. An officer in gray jacket is pulling up his shirt. You can see the gun in his waistband at 16 seconds. The officer in the gray jacket grabs the gun from the waistband By 18 seconds, the officer already has the gun in his possession and he's walking away. In these videos frames, you can see the agent has already disarmed the man and is walking away. See right there? That's the one you saw a second ago. One more time. Right there. And I'll play it more through with the other videos. A second later, after the man in the gray jacket is walking away, the officers pulled the victim up to his knees. One officer points his gun at the man point blank. Okay, so right here, he's up on his knees. There's plenty of still shots about this going around. Okay, and at that point, the gun's out of his waist. Now, this is where it gets incredible, whether we're talking about just incompetence, negligence. That ultimately one of two things happens. Either they respond for some unknown reason because they're jumpy and they're causing all of this. This is not some liberals are trying to attack us and we're so scared, which would be embarrassing in the first place. Because I'll play a video from a sheriff in a little bit where he's the one saying this. Like, we've been in much more dangerous situations with fewer people and we don't react like these Bush League. That's what he's calling them. But regardless, that they're reacting in a way that's unjustified based on the reality of the situation, the lies of 10,000% increase. They're making these things up. And on top of that, or rather the secondary point is, or they, when disarming the gun, accidentally did something with it, or somebody else accidentally fired, which caused them to fire on him. Right now, it seems to be up in the air. Now, since the man is disarmed, his hands are clearly visible and the gun's pointed at his face, which you can see. We'll play this again. 19 seconds with the unarmed man on his knees, the agent pulls the trigger point blank. The officer in the gray jacket looks back in surprise. The agent who has just shot raises his gun higher and shoots again. Point blank, unarmed man on his knees. 21 seconds, we can see the officer shooting officer as he backs up. Gun still aimed at the man's head. As he now lays flat on his side, the agent fires again. He continues to back up and fire at his now lifeless, unarmed corpse on the sidewalk. He fires at least 2 more shots. Reporting says 10 total. Notice how no other agents even has the weapon drawn because there is no threat. The man is disarmed. He was surrounded by officers. They pulled him into his knees and executed him point blank. Now, you could argue that was by design. I get the sense this was just incompetence, reactionary stuff, because they're not trained very well and because these people also are being driven by a very clear partisan hatred. Everyone's a terrorist that's what they're doing right now. You can hear it when they say things. I don't mean what they're literally saying, calling these people liberal terrorists or whatever. In many cases, talking to a Republican member of the military. I've shown you 2 examples of that. The agent fired multiple shots into a dead man. This was murder. Right. We'll go over the rest. He's breaking down what we've already been discussing, how it started and so on. So here's just one kind of still shot from a different angle. Not still shot, but a more high definition video. Stabilized version. One officer takes the gun from the guy's holster. The second officer shoots him in the back.
Honestly.
Okay, right? You can see the guy grabbing right there. Okay, right there. Now, you can see from other angles. I'll show you a better shot, but this is from the other angle, and what you can see, the guy in the middle right there is reaching into his waist, pulls it out right there, and turns and goes and moves away, and they shoot him. So ask yourself how that went down with the first shot, right? So this is my point. This is the anomaly. So I'll say right now, the guy he's backing away. This guy right there, I can't really point for you guys to see, but the guy with the cap sort of in the middle, on the other side of the group, he's got the gun. He just pulled it out of his waist. Then you hear one shot. Right there. Now, was that him? That's the argument. This is the guy with the gun, we'll show you, with the gray jacket who just pulled away. Now, did he fire on accident? That hasn't been clarified yet. Somebody did. Now, it seems weird to me because watch, now he's up on his knees. Right there. See, he's up on his knees, which tells me he wasn't shot yet. This is all assumption, guys. We're just looking at what we can tell right here. But the reality is he was murdered through negligence, however you else want to look at it, because of the way this went down, because of how it started, because of even at this moment, he didn't have a gun. Okay. If he was shot, I doubt he would be up on his knees right there, but it could be possible that they pulled him up. It's hard to say. I'll play it all the way through in a second, because then after that one shot, and you even see the guy in the gray jacket look back. So that might be, saying it came from somewhere else. It's hard to know. Then they shot him all the rest of the times. Listen to those shots continuing. I mean, I don't even understand how this is being seen as anything other than an absolute, negligent homicide at minimum. Yeah, play it all the way through.
Honestly.
Got the gun. Got. Yeah. Look at them all just standing there. 8 of them? My God.
You just do.
That's a can right there. Not sure of what. Some kind of bear spray or something. They're right there. Oh, not yet. Right. You can see it clearly. Oh, that's the wrong angle. I'll show you the other one. One shot. Now think about this in the sense of, a average American guy. Works for VA hospital, based on everything you can understand. He's got no criminal background. And this ultimately happened. I mean, and even if you want to argue that he did something wrong, is this what is the world we're in today, where you can make one misstep and be murdered in the street? Apparently so. Apparently in Vegas or here or Renee Good, it apparently doesn't matter as long as the right side does it. To some people, anyway. So here is Ryan Grimm. Here's the gun that they claimed. Of course, he had another clip, so therefore he must have been a murderer. I mean, what's funny is the people that claim to be the ones protecting the Second Amendment as Republicans seem to not even understand how guns work or understand what gun owners do. It's painful. But he says, Bill Melgan says, DHS tells Fox News the suspect was armed with a gun which had been recovered by federal agents. You see, they're lying right there. They knew how this went down because their agents were involved. And they still try to water it down in a way to let you assume the incorrect thing. These are just criminal people, guys. Trump has unilaterally repealed the Second Amendment and Americans bearing arms or merely having them legally in their cars, you can now be executed. Now he's seeing this as the image, but let's remember, he is actually referring, whether intentionally or not, to a case that we've already covered, which he does in a second in another post. The woman who didn't have a gun in her car, who one of these agents literally said 5 shots or 7 shots, 5 holes, and brags about how good of a shot he was. They lied about her having a gun. This all very clearly broke down. You can look this up. It's easily provable. I went over it more than once. The case was they rammed her car by their misunderstanding, jumped out, and then shot her. She luckily survived because they claimed afterward by looking into her information that she was armed because they saw that she had a legal gun that she could carry. So they just made that argument, I guess, in desperate hope that she had it on her. She did not. It was at home. But they still lied since she had a semi-automatic rifle or whatever they called it. McLaughlin, Bondi, Trump, they all backed it up. So yes, apparently you can be murdered in the street for simply having something on you, let alone even registered to you. And he says they took his firearm and then killed him afterwards. So he saw that later. Johnny Graz says, couldn't it be more clear that the goal was a civil war? Actually, let me see if this one has the angle where you can actually see. Yeah, here we go. Okay, check this out. See, you can literally see the gun, guys. That's what's important. Right here, he's got the gun in his hand. He literally pulls out the gun from the guy's waistband. That's it right there. So there's no misunderstanding this, guys. Every which way. There's like 6 different people that filmed this, which is why they hate that you're observing, guys, because this happens. This is a textbook case of why they're so desperate to stop you from filming them and stop you from now who shot them? Who's responsible? They're going to hold the line. Noam and Trump and Bondi, they're going to hold the line. They're not going to tell you who this person was. How much you want to bet? Because nobody took their masks off and now we don't know. Is this the country we live in where they can just murder people in the streets and nobody gets held accountable because the government stands in between you and them? This is every authoritarian country in the world right now, or rather government, I mean, in history. This is how it goes. He literally has the gun right in his hands, right there. Right? And then he walks away with the gun. See, it's clear. So same thing as he's saying, could it be more clear that the goal is civil war? Now, that depends on whether you think this is being intentionally done either by them or those above them. It says the last desperate move of a failed ruling class is to get the peasants to fight amongst themselves so they don't start building guillotines. It's a very important thing to consider. Adam simply says slowed and zoomed footage shows the victim's gun being seized prior to the first shot. Now, here's even Robert Barnes, guys. Now, he's been clearly criticizing plenty of different things. He's not just been blindly supporting them, but he has been in some ways that I thought was a little bit on the line, but overall, ultimately was a very huge MAGA Trump supporter and has been taking a principled stance. I think that's worthy of respect and calling it out in a positive way every time. He shoots him in the back after he was disarmed. That's Robert Barnes, the lawyer, making this case. And this person, Justin, says, the shooter did not know he was disarmed. He just heard gun, gun, gun. He was trained to do so. That's your response? So it's okay he murdered him because he misunderstood? Well, that would still be something that could be charged for, you understand? And they're not supposed to just respond and shoot who's in front of them because they hear the word gun. That would mean they're not trained properly. But people like this are clearly okay with just going whatever. But whatever, if they say it, then I'm going to defend it no matter how I can, no matter the embarrassing mental gymnastics I have to make after claiming that shall not be infringed every day of my life. It's embarrassing, guys. And by the way, that's not even actually what happened. Not the first time. But doesn't matter. Facts don't matter to these people. Ryan Grimm says, here's Tim Pool, which we'll get into more toward the end. This is what Grimm says is more important. But all these painfully obvious fake patriots out there who are trying to tell you this is all okay. Go back to sleep. Tim Pool says he clearly was not intending to massacre ICE, and he clearly was resisting arrest. No, he really wasn't. One, because as Ryan says, I don't think you can say he was resisting arrest because there was no effort to actually arrest him, which matters. Or say, hey, you're under arrest. The agent shoved the woman to the ground. He helped her out and was sprayed, thrown to the ground, and beaten. The natural human response is to try to cover your face and protect your body as you're being assaulted. And let's not forget, he was just pepper sprayed. He doesn't know who's tackling him if it's done. I mean, it's possible. Maybe it wasn't enough. Maybe he was blind. It's worth considering. If you're sprayed that close in the face with pepper spray, you can't see if you've done this before. I'm saying it's certainly possible. Maybe he could a little bit. But the thing to consider is whether he didn't even know who was tackling him, which makes a huge difference, doesn't it? Because even listen to it, in many cases, they're not going, we're ICE, you're under arrest. They don't do that. It says interpreting the body movement as resisting arrest is too much of a leap. Now, he's being very generous with this ridiculous person called Tim Pool. The agents escalated the situation repeatedly and then using their own escalation as a reason to kill him. That actually seems to be their current standard operating procedure within the current dynamic of ICE. That's not the same as before. Oh, wait, and this is one of the responses who says, he physically put himself in between police and someone they were interacting with, which, by the way, see, they're stretching this. Interacting with? Was she under arrest? Was she being arrested? Was she being interviewed? None of those things. They weren't interacting with her. He shoved her to the ground because she said a mean thing or whatever went down right there. My point is, you can see that there wasn't some ongoing engagement. It was a reaction while carrying a firearm. Okay, so now you're suddenly saying that anybody who legally carries a firearm is suddenly legally accountable when they do something that's not illegal because the gun? These are supposed to be Republicans, you understand. A tremendously stupid thing to do. Freely carry? I mean, we're going to get into this next. But right now, what people are laughing about, people are starting to see through the left-right illusion, is you have Democrats on CNN and NBC basically defending the Second Amendment to Republicans who are saying it shouldn't matter in their own way. It's a obvious moment for people to wake up to this. Ryan Grimm also points to this one, who's basically defending this. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This was a different one. There's plenty you could find out there, but it's like with Renee Good, guys. If you can just be honest about what you're looking at, like we just showed you, there's no error in that conversation. You could argue some variance there, but there is what they said, just like every time, was a lie. I'll show you what Noam said. They just lied to you, guys. Same with that leader Gestapo guy who they are calling a munchkin now, which is kind of funny. Rob says, after analyzing the videos, I believe it's highly likely the first shot was a negligent discharge from the agent. That makes the most sense to me right now. In the gray jacket, after he moved the SIG P320 from Pretti's holster while exiting the scene. And Ryan says there may indeed have been a negligent discharge by the untrained idiot agent. And the P320 actual, and this is all over right now. You can look it up. It apparently has problems with that. But that becomes something circulating around. Worth doing your own due diligence to find out if it's even the right gun, or, these things become like the talking point. But that is going around. I agree. That's the argument. That gun has that problem and it discharges. Okay. That alone would be bad. But worse is that his colleague who shot him saw him take the gun. So knew Alex was unarmed by then. Now you can decide if you think I agree with that, but it's hard to know what he saw and didn't see and what he knew, but I agree. When you look at it, it's easy to assume, which we shouldn't do, that this person was able to see that he took the gun, but it's happening fast. My point is, even if they didn't, the way that they did this was insanely criminal, guys, because if that means they didn't even know whether he had a gun or not, right? Which is how it starts. Now, Khaleesi points out some witnesses. There's a couple of people. Of course, you could always argue that they were on a certain side, which always could be the case. But guys, this is how it works. You have people that give their testimony, and witness testimony is famously unreliable, because even if you think you saw something, your brain can remember things incorrectly. That's easy to look up. It actually is quite common. Police will tell you people will all see something and they'll report different colors for cars or whatever, right? But this case, there's somebody who was there, take it for what you will, as well as somebody who lived close, who was a doctor. Same story, guys. They wouldn't let him treat him. A witness who was only 5 feet away from Alex Pretti filed an affidavit depicting what she saw. She says he didn't touch any of the officers and didn't appear to be resisting. He was merely helping a woman who had been pepper sprayed, which is what you saw. She says she's terrified that ICE is looking for her. I mean, wouldn't you be? Now, that may be unfounded, but with what's going on right now, when people are being kidnapped in the middle of the night without any process, with any warrant or identification, in some cases being sent to places around the world without legal standing. In this case, American citizens who, by the way, that has happened to, or in this case, people being arrested as American citizens and then punished in some kind of immigration cell for 3-4 days without, even though they proved they were U.S. citizens. That's happened many times that I've already seen. A veteran, what's his name? Redis? He did a whole expose about it. They literally punished him because he told them he was a U.S. citizen, and they felt stupid about it. They literally kept him in prison for multiple days, wouldn't give him water. I mean, guys, we've gone over this so many times. It's painful that it's how many times it's happening. It's not a unique bad apple situation, okay? So now she's worried because she may be a witness to their murder, guys. So I don't think this is a joke. Saying that they are lying, she's worried because they're saying that she's lying and doesn't know what they'll do to her if they find her. That's what her testimony breaks down. You can consider that. Here, Aaron Melnick, reporting what Kyle Cheney's pointing out, and he's going through quite a bunch of these things. As the plaintiffs in the lawsuit to restrict ICE's use of force in Minnesota filed an emergency motion with the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals tonight to reinstate those restrictions. It included this affidavit from a person who witnessed the shooting. It says plaintiffs in the case have added a declaration from a pediatrician who sought to administer aid to Alex after he was shot. ICE agents appeared to be counting his bullet wounds. You know what? If I find out this is the same person who bragged about 7 shots, 5 holes, it will definitely make sense, won't it? I'm sure we'll probably find out, but maybe not if they never admit who it was. If they never, because you know what? Now that I take it back, I don't even think we got that original guy's. Oh, wait, maybe we did because he was posting something. I'm going to look into this more as we go forward. But right now, we don't know who this shooter is, so it's kind of fruitless unless we find out. Which, in what world would we never find out who this person's name is? Ryan Grimm. Oh, wait, hold on. Make sure I didn't miss this. I think Aaron said something. Melnick, the lawyer, points out another declaration you have to read. Alex Pretti was shot near the apartment of a doctor who saw the shooting occur, rushed to provide emergency aid, and he was lying on the street dying. They describe what they saw. The victim had at least 3 bullet holes in his back. It's insane. Ryan Grimm. This is the comparison to that older point we made. Josh here says Trump-appointed judge blocks FBI, DOJ, DHS from destroying or altering evidence related to the shooting of Alex by Border Patrol agents in Minneapolis. Judge Eric Tostrand grants TRO set Monday hearing. They literally are going, you better not destroy. They've already done this. The car in that last shooting, they drove away and no one ever found it. I mean, this is just so mind-blowing how clear it all is. And that's why even honest conservatives are going, yeah, this is pretty crazy. You can prove most of this stuff. So Ryan says the doctor who tried to treat Alex was sitting around, they said they were sitting around counting bullet holes. When ICE agents shot U.S. citizens, this is what I was referencing, Martinez in October, he similarly bragged in a text to fellow agents about the number of holes he put in her. And he said 7, He said 7 shots. No, that's actually inaccurate. His report was 7 shots, 5 holes. You can look this up. I've gone over it many times. These agents do not see the American people as people to protect, but as an NPC in a video game that they're playing, or worse, as actual enemies. They should not be walking the streets armed. Now, I do want to argue that I don't think that's every ICE agent. That's why some of them have made statements. Some of them have been pushed out, resigned. That's where we are. But in a general sense, you can't know for sure what their intent is or what they're thinking. But I agree with the general framing. I mean, you can see where you can, what they say, right? Where they frame it as liberals, crazy liberals were fighting, or, that you're going to be, I mean, all the different statements. I don't want to try to remember off the top of my head, where they've been caught on video saying exactly what they're trying to do. It's just, this is not a unique, isolated incident, which is terrifying. Now, this is even crazier, which we mentioned. This is the local police. Here's what he said it in his first briefing. And just to make it even more clear, he follows up and explains it even more clear. I mean, it's clear in the first one, but just in case, they were not allowed to investigate their own state location because the federal agents wouldn't let them, even though they had a warrant. There's no legal standing for them to stop them. What does that show you? I think we already know, if we're not being blind to this, they're covering something up. They've already been caught. They already know something, that their narrative was false, just like with Renee Good, just like with countless other examples of ICE agents being caught lying about what they did, and there's never been any criminal accountability. This is straight up criminal activity.
Good morning. I was in contact with the Minneapolis Police Department after the incident that you're all familiar with now. They requested our Force Investigations Unit respond to the scene and conduct such an independent investigation as we have in other recent incidents in the city of Minneapolis. What occurred was our team responded to the scene, and I was in contact with federal authorities to inform them that that was going to occur and that we were responding to the scene in Minneapolis. When our team arrived, they were blocked by federal agents with the Department of Homeland Security from accessing the scene. We were
The Department of Homeland Security. Is this a national security interest? I mean, think about how wild that is, guys. We're talking about the DHS, Homeland Security, blocking out local police for an investigation. I don't think you can paint this any more clearly.
Worked with them, and we're in contact with the FBI, trying to attempt to access the scene so we can gather evidence to understand what occurred and work through this process. Our team also secured a search warrant for the scene, which is an unusual move in a public area like that, but we did that attempting to have judicial approval to enter this scene to gather evidence.
Meaning they already knew that they were going to try to stop them. That's why they did the unusual step, because clearly, and they were right, guys, even though they had the warrant, they tried to stop them. So you can clearly see a level, whether it's local versus federal or some different division within the government, which doesn't mean good guy, bad guy. Always important to point out that they could just be fighting over control over your life. It's worth considering either way, that there's an element within this that's like, okay, we see what you're doing. Now, very well, that could just be a partisan game. And you know why? You know how you would know that? If nobody ever goes to jail despite the evidence. But either way, they came at this because they clearly knew that they were going to be blocked out, and they were. Now, what does this do? That makes a very compelling point that there is something being covered up.
We were once again blocked by federal authorities to go in and do that scene examination. We have a long history of working side by side with the Federal Bureau of Investigation on all types of cases. That's true in other high-profile incidents that you've seen in officer-involved shootings, and that remains the case that we do and will be going forward.
So here's the follow-up, essentially, where he's reiterating, because I think what's interesting is what he says there, I think is pretty clear, but people go like, well, did you just say that they stopped you? Like, it's almost like a double take, right? And here's what he says in response.
So to be clear, you said you got a signed judicial warrant to gain access and were still denied by federal agents?
Yes, that's accurate. The question was, we had a signed warrant and we were still denied access to the scene. That's accurate, correct. We took the step of getting the search warrant because we were denied access to the scene. So we thought that we'd be able to get access to the scene, much like we would anywhere else, by having an independent judge agree that we have probable cause to investigate the incident at the scene. That was provided the information to the Department of Homeland Security, and they said that this was a scene and matter being investigated by the federal government, and they would not allow us physical access to the scene.
You arrived at the scene, you were denied. You go to a judge, ask for a warrant, though Judge Grant said warrant. You show up with that, you're still denied.
That's accurate. We were denied after we provided information we had a warrant.
I really do. Like, if you're in their position, how do you rationalize that? Like, how do you make that decision? And then, that, to me, what that shows you is a reactionary moment where you're desperately trying to cover this up and you just go, don't let him in, don't let him in. No rational reason, no way to explain it to the media. I just don't know how else you understand that. I think that's very, very, very clear. Now, in regard to this point, the Second Amendment and the constitutional rights element of this, or just any legal reality, I think it's important to focus on this, the hypocrisy of the right side of the conversation doing what they're doing right now. Now, if you understand what we're always trying to show you, then you already know that this is the left-right paradigm is an illusion to get you to fight your neighbor. But it's interesting nonetheless for those that are still grappling with that to recognize the hypocrisy with this moment. And Dylan wrote something very eloquent as usual. And he says, if the Second Amendment does not apply to this exact kind of moment, what do people think it is for? Because what you're getting is a lot of conservatives who are now saying he shouldn't have a gun. He shouldn't have brought it to a protest. Conservatives saying that in a place where it's legal for him to have it. It's just beyond the pale. And it's the people you expect, guys. If you haven't seen it, from the Alex Jones, Tim Pool, Nick Sore, the whole shebang, all of them. I stand with ICE. It's wild. He says a citizen can lawfully carry, see masked federal agents beating someone in public, move toward the scene to help, especially because what they're doing is illegal, and then get erased with a hail of bullets because he had a gun. That excuse is an insult in a country where possession is legal by design, where the whole point is that the public never becomes a disarmed audience watching state power operate with impunity. I'm not interested in arguing frame by frame footage. I'm interested in the principle that a free people cannot accept a standard where lawful carry becomes a death sentence the second authority feels threatened. It's either you have principles or you don't, guys. If that is the standard, then the Second Amendment has been reduced to a vibe. The founders did not write it so Republicans could do militia cosplay on weekends. Very well put. Where honest people out there who actually have principles, whatever side they're on, will absolutely understand that. Now, on the point of hypocrisy, let's not forget we already saw this. This is a Democrat, or at least the point was in a Democrat location supporting the Democrat agenda. And, I don't think it's expressed whether he is or not. The point, though, is that they're calling him a liberal. Eagle Guntherman, a major Republican influencer. This is my neighborhood. Liberal man with a rifle stands outside of home to protect from ICE. Lock him up. I mean, this was over everything we've seen. I forget what the engagement was. Let's take a look. I mean, like I said before, he's borderline ratioed. And the reality is, as even this says, this is the Second Amendment, which gives people the right to keep and bear arms. Gunther Eagleman has previously said, we must never give up our Second Amendment. And here he is saying, oh, it's a liberal, though. And again, something I don't agree with, even though what they're doing is criminal. And it's not like he's out there face to face. He's in his own location saying, and this is identical to what militias and Republican elements have done forever. Here is this shockingly embarrassing hypocrite out here telling you that guy's not allowed. These people don't believe in anything. They are cosplaying as what you want for their agenda. Or he actually does believe in these things and he's willing to challenge or undermine them because of a political agenda or because he's being paid. I don't know, but that's worthy of ridicule, guys. And here's the clip, in case you didn't see it. It's worth hearing. Oh, here it is right here. And just to hear what he has to say. This should be defended by anybody with principles who believes in the Second Amendment.
Okay. Yeah. You live in the neighborhood? Yep, this is my block, this is my area. I don't go into other people's neighborhoods and try and intimidate them. I protect my people.
Are you giving out your name?
No, I'm okay with that. Our neighborhood's showing up.
You guys had a lot of people out here, right?
At least 30 or more. Yeah. 40 or 50.
That's pretty good for a quick turnout.
Right. So a guy who's in front of his own home, or rather his own neighborhood, right? Who's legally allowed to have that. That's the case of where he is. And this Second Amendment supporting Republican says, lock him up because I don't like that he's doing that. It's just painful, isn't it? It's truly painful. And these people only grow in influence on a platform that claims to believe in these values. Now, just in case you missed this part, Derek Burrows put out an article about Donald Trump and the gun rights groups. And I thought this was majorly important because it shows you an obvious hypocritical stance. Gun rights groups condemn Donald Trump and his DOJ for defending National Firearms Act. Now, I won't go through it all again, but it's worth looking at what they were saying as they're calling out Bondi, right? Unfortunately, Bondi defends this and uses some of the worst of gun control lobbies' talking points to do so. They're calling them hypocrites. They're calling them out. I also covered this in the show where I went over that. Gun rights groups say Trump direction is anti-Second Amendment. I mean, what point do we just wake up from this stupor, guys? I'm speaking to the ones that need to anyway. So let's point out some of these hypocritical stances and some of the people from the government and people in the social media sphere and the shocking level of hypocrisy. Robert Barnes, yep, calling it out. Here, as he rightly calls him, counterfeit cash. Gotta love that. Now, here is Kash Patel out here attacking Second Amendment rights and lying again about the law. That's how Barnes frames it. I agree.
Thousands of people are marching through Minneapolis. They are targeting the Border Patrol. I mean, it feels like...
Great journalism there. Are they all targeting Border Patrol? Well, in a protest sense, yes. But you see how they make that targeting, impeding, interfering. That's protesting to them is that now. Or at least that's what Maria Bartola, I forget her name. But it's the point, basically, just parroting the talking point. That's what the corporate media and the mainstream alternative does every day.
Like the rhetoric and the protesting is only ramping up. What is your advice to the people right now?
Yeah, how dare they talk more and how dare they protest? It's terrifying, isn't it?
Who are outraged that this is a second killing at the hands of Border Patrol in 2 weeks.
Don't you love that overlap, though? You know, but we're outraged about the killing, and you clearly just set that up to rationalize why it happened. It's just so. It's kind of embarrassing, isn't it? But it makes me sick. Like the kind of people like that. Anyway, this is the point. Let me play it again. Listen to Kash.
Your advice to the people right now who are outraged that this is a second killing at the hands of Border Patrol in 2 weeks.
As Christy said, you cannot bring a firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest that you want. It's that.
Yep, you absolutely can. That's wrong. And you're an idiot. Or he doesn't know he's wrong, which is even more alarming, guys. Of course you can, in a place where it's legal to do so. You are literally at a place where he has a legal right to concealed carry. So you tell me that because suddenly a protest happens, therefore that location is no longer valid? He was on a street sidewalk. Do you really think that he does? I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know. Do you think he doesn't know that? It wouldn't surprise me. These people don't actually seem to know anything they claim to support. But it could very well be that he's willfully saying the thing that's wrong, which will undermine your rights and allow them to remove them. Even though they can't legally do so, they can just not respect them, but they will act as if they don't exist. These are the patriots out there saving you from the deep state. These are the ones that are fighting for your constitution. Wake up, guys. If you're out there and you believe that, where are you looking right now? They are destroying every single thing this country holds sacred. And the next Democrat, Republic, or whatever it is, will what I call them before, the Republic, I don't know. I tried to Demlicans. I don't know. They together will continue to break this or to progress this problem. My point is, no matter who the next left side of this comes into play, they're only going to ramp up the problems like everyone before have. Take a second and look back. Look back at the transition. Look at what they said they were going to do, and then look at what they were really doing. And what you notice is a continuation of the same agenda that never really slows down.
Loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest that you want. It's that simple. You don't have that right to break the law.
Oh, you do have that right, and it's not against the law. But you see how he says it that way? You know, like someone's training them in some way to get these certain manipulative tools, the words that confuse people who don't understand what they're talking about.
And incite violence. We will, of course.
Oh, now it's inciting violence? I'm sorry. I shouldn't stop it this often. I know you guys don't like that, but you're inciting violence by doing something you're legally allowed to do. But you're not inciting violence, by the way, even if you were allowed to have that. That's not inciting violence in your pocket. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is just what you're doing is creating the circumstance, which isn't illegal, and then pointing at the presence of just the circumstance being there as the incitement of violence. Isn't that that's basically the same as words are violence? It's not a violent situation until that action is violent.
Firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest that you want. It's that simple. You don't have that right to break the law and incite violence. We will, of course, always protect your First Amendment speech. And if you peacefully protest, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you have seen a trend here, not just in Minnesota, but across the country, in these protests turning into violent scenarios.
After they're engaged with by ICE in almost every circumstance, by the way. Now, I'm not going to say there are not examples of the left or the right creating violence, but that doesn't then make every protest violence or every protest something sudden you have to shut down because they all are agitators or they're all, this is what you guys keep doing.
And people attacking law enforcement. That's when you go over the line, and that's when law enforcement steps in.
Okay, when somebody attacks law enforcement, then arrest that person, right? If that's what's actually happening. That does not then invalidate everybody they're protesting. Left and right, our government's done this my entire life. But just think about what he's doing and think about how disgustingly unconstitutional and illegitimate this is. What they're doing is supporting government power over your life.
Protest that you want. It's that simple. You don't have that right to break the law and incite violence. We will, of course, always protect your First Amendment speech.
You see how that works, guys? They don't protect anything. That's an inherent right that they have no involvement in. Now, if they want, they can uphold that. You know, if you look at the language used by the founding fathers, the Constitution, there's a reason they use the words they did. Today, they always use the words that make you confusingly think that they have the power to control those things. We can take it away. We can give it. We can protect it for you. That's not how this works. It is something, now you could argue in a different context, the government can help protect those rights in a general sense by, standing by them. But what he's saying is we can help you have that. They're making it sound like they can take it away the moment that you do something they don't like. That's not how this works. And what do you mean by peaceful protest? Well, just because you're out there doing something they might call violence, even though it's not, like they're telling you saying words are violence today. Didn't Bondi literally say that? Either way, you get the point, guys. They're using this to frame it in a way that they can then go, that's no longer allowed. This guy did this, shut it all down. That's what they're doing. And if you're honest with yourself, you already know this because it's been going on quite a long time. And that's, again, Robert Barnes, counterfeit cash. He says, yes, you could bring a firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest you want. It's called the Second Amendment. Gen X Girl, Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. Now, there's been some very frustrating responses from some of the larger gun groups, by the way. I think that clearly there's a political momentum happening in some of these cases, but this is important from the location it happened in.
The Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus has sent us a statement. We do want to share it with you. It says in part, despite widespread speculation regarding intent, there has been no evidence produced indicating an intent to harm the officers. We're calling for a full and transparent investigation by both state and federal authorities. Every peaceable Minnesotan has the right to keep and bear arms.
Talking about Alex Pretti there. Yes. So they are saying they do not have any sense of intent.
Well, I think the more interesting thing about that is that, this group some people vilify it because post-Annunciation shooting, they came out so strongly against any kind of other, measures that would be banning weapons. Control. And this is a group that's actually saying, hey, this is the only group I've heard today that says, let's not jump to conclusions.
Right. Which is pretty sad when you think about it, when you've got groups that have classically stood by shall not be infringed, suddenly going, well, Democrats are acting crazy. That's what you're getting from certain gun right groups, just showing you a complete lack of principle. In an example, by the way, that is far more clear than ones we've seen in the past. Justin Amash, highlighting what this is, who is his name? Bill Esseley. He says, if you approach law enforcement with a gun, there is a high likelihood they will be legally justified in shooting you. This is what they're saying. And here's Twitter's context, even from their manipulated grok, or rather just, the platform. The U.S. Constitution, particularly the 2nd, 4th, and 14th Amendments, prohibit officers from shooting citizens merely for possessing a weapon that is not an imminent threat. You see, these people either don't understand the founding documents they point to, or they're trying to lie to you about them. This was reaffirmed in Graham versus Connor, which says force must be reasonable. Justin Amash, quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed unless you approach a law enforcement officer. Same old thing, right? Shall not be infringed, asterisk, except with a pathogen. He's making the same point. If you have principles, then you're going to say that the reality is shall not be infringed Period. When you say unless or if you approach a law, that's not really what they're saying, but that's the implication. That you can have that in a legal sense, but if you dare walk up to an officer, that's not the reality of it, guys. It's just not. And these people are trying to lie to you. Now, if you have the mind that we should change that, that's a whole different conversation. And you can involve yourself in that conversation, but realize that what the basis of this is that these are inherent rights that exist, that they simply outlined. Now, that can still be, the country can get together and say, well, we no longer acknowledge those rights. That's certainly possible. But it's something that in their mindset, as they wrote it, was not a given or taken thing. It was inherent. And we should, as the people of this country within our borders, enforce those inherent God-given rights. It's very easy when you understand this. And that's why when you get to things like Mayberry versus Madison, they ruled that if it's repugnant to the Constitution, then it's null and void. As the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights were the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Those were not repugnant to the Constitution. Anything, and I can show you plenty of them since then that have been passed, even by Congress, that are contrary to any of those things, then that shouldn't be legal. That's null and void per the Supreme Court. But we have long since got away from that, and plenty of stuff they do right now is unconstitutional, including laws they pass, which are not legal or constitutional. Ryan Grimm, there was indeed a strong faction of British loyalists making just these arguments in 1776. Their descendants are still with us. If the patriots of today were alive in 1776, if you don't like the colonies, why don't you just leave? We respect authority. Comply with redcoats and you won't get hurt. Redcoats' lives matters. If you have nothing to hide from the king, then you have nothing to fear. Just obey the king's laws. That was a little bit of a stretch, but realize the same point we always make about this, guys. These are the way that they're acting is the opposite of the rebels fight the deep state. They are quite literally gaslighting for the power. Maybe they don't. I think a lot of them don't even realize that. I mean, this comment itself is in response to Matt Walsh, which we'll get to in a second. I didn't even see this one, actually. Yeah, it'll derail, I think. I'll look at it later. We get to some of the points he made. I don't want to, I'll just go through it and understand it, and then it'll take away from the show. I want to finish this up. This is the last basic segment right here. Now, here's the clip of Alex, by the way. This is Philip Lewis shared this. A video of Alex Pretti was posted on Facebook by Mark Randolph, the son of the deceased veteran, with this caption: "Rest in peace, Alex Pretti. He was my dad's ICU nurse. He read my dad's final salute, excuse me, at the VA after he passed away. Never wanted to share this video, but his speech is very on point." Now, so it's the personal video that they did just amongst themselves, and he just happened to post it. At least that's how it's being framed, and that does seem to be the case. Also, my father's final words to me was continue to fight the good fight. He would be honored in Alex's sacrifice and ashamed of the current administration. In my dad's words, I encourage you all to continue to fight the good fight. Here's what Alex Pretti had to say about this deceased veteran in his hospital sometime before this took place yesterday.
Terrence Lee Randolph, March 30th, 1947, December 10th, 2024.
In case it was unclear, that's Alex reading.
Today we remember that freedom is not free. We have to work at it, nurture it, protect it, and even sacrifice for it. May we never forget and always remember our brothers and sisters who have served so that we may enjoy the gift of freedom. So in this moment, we remember and give thanks for their dedication and selfless service to our nation in the cause of our freedom. In this solemn hour, we render them our honor and our gratitude.
You got to really think about this. This is a guy who clearly worked at a VA hospital, clearly had respect for the military and the people that within it. Does that sound like a typical framing of a Democrat hating America, hates our troops, hates all that? I'm so tired of these lazy tropes and categorizations they use. It's just not the reality today. There's some level of truth to it in a slanting sense, but it's just not the case. I think it's less and less every day. The point was that they want to make this guy out to be some radical leftist terrorist. Seriously? You know what I mean? Like I said before, the one thing does not then prove that anything's possible. But when you understand all that we can see and look at the video of the way it went down, this is a person who was standing up for the country in everything, it seems. He's standing up because he believed that what they were doing was wrong. What they're doing is wrong. Doesn't mean violence should be justified against them, but the reality at the end of the day is he's standing up and out there knowing there's a risk because what they're doing is wrong. And that applies to every single American whose rights are being undermined because of what they're doing. And that he sits there and says, on the classic freedom isn't free, right? Which is something that I make fun of in the way that it's used by the government. But what he's ultimately saying right there is that this is not like, let's dismantle this country, we hate it, which is a valid opinion. You can believe what you want. Doesn't mean you're a terrorist. The case is that what he's highlighting is the opposite of what they frame Democrats think, right? He's saying this is something we have to fight for, that we have to work at. It just makes me sad. That this person will forever be framed as something he's not because of maniacal, dishonest people. And it's just disappointing. Thomas Massie, one of the very few people in government that came out and had the right stance on this. He said, first, this is the same one we showed you. If you approach law enforcement, you might get shot. Okay. Thomas Massie says, carrying a firearm is not a death sentence. It's a constitutionally protected, God-given right. And if you don't understand this, you have no business in law enforcement or government. Simple. And this is why they hate him. Here's what Peace by Truth had to say. Massie, support you. However, you need to be objective, which I believe he is, but you can decide. There is an organized effort to attack and assault federal agents. Now, that's a valid point to consider. He says, if you engage federal agents violently, that's not what happened. See, this is where, you're buying the narrative that's being sold without understanding it. Like they put out false videos about Renee Good. The same thing's happening right now. It says, if you're going to, if you engage federal agents violently and pull your gun out, which he didn't do, chances are the agents are going to defend and aren't going to protect you. Antifa is a terrorist group. Okay. Clearly, I get the sense this is an honest person who's been misled by his side. Because the reality is he supports Massie. Not that that necessarily proves anything, but that he's of the mind, and he's wrong, that he, one, acted violently, and two, pulled his gun. Both of those things are false. That's what everyone from Alex Jones and all the rest are screaming to people, still at this point, it seems. Think about that. And so my point, though, is to consider this argument, which is a fair point. I do believe there is an actual organized effort. You might come to find that it's the side you don't think it is. Or really just, it's your government. And the point would be that the people you think you're fighting with are the ones, at least in part, that are creating the chaos to get you to react so they can create their agenda. It's classic policy, guys. But my point is, do consider this, right? That there is a level of this, even if it's just the Democrats trying to put people in there to cause the chaos they can use to point at the government. That is the classic tactics I'm used to. I just don't think it's only one side at this point. And if it is, it doesn't invalidate your rights. That's the last point to make here. Let's just even say everything they're saying is true. There's an organized Soros effort. Let's just even say it's Waltz and Omar trying to cover this up, which Trump is trying to claim. And that they organized this effort and put these people out there. Okay, fine. There's no facts to back that up at the moment in this particular case. But even if it was all true, that wouldn't then invalidate his rights. That's really how this has to come down. If you have principles, you can acknowledge that even if they did that doing the wrong thing does not then make it okay, guys. It's just childish almost. It's wrong because what you did broke the law. What you did violated his rights, even if it was organized. Now, here is a sheriff speaking about what I'm not sure is this exact event, but just generally speaking, what ICE is and what they're doing, about at least one recent example where they left the car unattended. And I want to show you this because I think there are a lot of policemen out there on any side of the paradigm who have values, who care, who actually believe in the Constitution, who are saying this is wrong what they're doing and I need to call it out because they are people with integrity, right? Maine Sheriff Kevin Joyce on the disloyalty, and he calls it Bush League policing of ICE.
We've all seen the 3-minute video. And I've heard some people say, oh, it's hard to watch. What was hard is that there were 5 to 7 ICE agents there. In my world, my colleagues, we've arrested some dangerous people on the back roads of Cumberland County with 3 or less deputies. Yet, this was a show of force, a show of whatever they were trying to do with 7 people. What's even more disturbing.
Just a quick point, at the same moment where you get the Benny Johnson of the world trying to tell you all these Antifa people are a bunch of wimps that can't do anything. But at the same time, that's why we need 7, because they're all trying to kill us. You know, well, even wimps can come out and hurt you. I just think it's a funny point to make that they're either dangerous and organized or they're completely, like No Kings. That was their argument. Oh, they can't even organize anything. That's why it wasn't bad. Okay, well, then you're countering your own point. The point is that they're lying about damn near everything for both sides. And that's why that happens.
Is the comment made by the witness that videotaped this encounter, who said that in the 3 minutes they got out, they pulled a guy from the car, handcuffed him, put him in the car, they all took off, leaving his car with the windows down, the lights on, unsecure, and unoccupied.
And who's to say this guy was even a criminal? More than often than not right now, it turns out to be not the case.
They left it right on the side of the street. Folks, that's Bush League policing.
I really appreciate this because you see the point is that why should we care? They're a bunch of Democrat, assuming you know that's the case, first of all. It's so incredible how quickly people go, well, they're bad, they told us. The government, you mean? Right. But realize that that's what we classically, even if you hate that person, even if that's a murdering psychopath, the reality is, one, leaving the car there hinders other people too. That's, they're supposed to care about that. But secondarily, it's just the right thing to do. See, doing the wrong thing because he's a bad guy means you're just like them. But if you know he's a bad guy and you still do the right thing, that means you have integrity, right? That you care about other things than your personal emotional reaction. But right now, that's what the Trump administration is doing more than anything. It's coddling that. Hate those people. Act emotionally. We're strong. It doesn't matter. They're literally leading into the worst traits of humanity, the lowest common denominator.
Again, in my world, you wait for a wrecker. You wait for somebody to come pick it up that the individual wants. Or you get permission to drive the vehicle into a public parking spot and you lock it up and you give the person their car keys. You don't leave their personal belongings unsecure along the streets of the city of Portland. It's not fair to the guy that owns the car. It's surely not fair to the Portland police. And it's what my understanding is going on. I'll end with this. We're being told one story, which is totally different than what's occurring or what occurred last night.
So next, I wanted to show you something I found interesting. So this is where I first saw this. And I was just curious what Grok had to say about this. And I asked it. I'm going to make a point about how you can't trust these platforms, guys, which you already should know. But because I often use it as a counterbalance to make a point, I don't want that to be seen as somehow support of this. I don't. I've made my points very clear about that. In the case of there is, it's a line we draw, right? And we all do this for many reasons, different contexts. The point is, I do find it of value, maybe I'm wrong, in using this to sort of expose people that need to see it from a side they think, might feel like it's Grok they can listen to more and so on. And if you see that Grok says that Elon's lying, maybe that opens your mind a little bit. It may, you guys can decide. This is fascinating to me. I said, is this what I'll ask? I was curious, what exact incident was he referring to, and to see what it would say. Guess what it says? This post, and it's featured video clip of a man in U.S. General's uniform. No, it's not. It says this post. Where was it? Oh, this post captions it. However, it says the attached video and visible speaker do not match. The uniform and appearance align with a high-ranking military officer, not a local law enforcement. And this platform frequently posts videos of generals and officials criticizing them, basically long form insinuating without saying that it's not real. It looks contradictory, and it looks like basically they have the wrong info, like saying that it seems like it's an altered post. You can read the rest of it. I just think that's fat. And I went further and I said, it's actually real quick. Why are you making that up? And it goes, oh, I see. I misidentified the uniform. It is the obvious Maine police uniform that would, this is like before. Do you really think that you can frame it as a Maine police chief and oopsie, we thought it was not the obvious Maine police chief that we later saw it as? The clip appears to be from a recent conference. So I think this is really obvious of this platform trying to subtly misguide you in ways that they can't be like, oh, well, I was wrong. Hey, maybe it's just wrong. But I think it's more than that. Here's the actual post if you want to check it out. It goes over. This was January 22nd. Okay, let's get into the responses from the government. Here's what the Homeland Security account put out, which you already briefly saw. As DHS law enforcement officers were conducting a targeted operation, that's what they say every single time, even though almost all of them are not, as far as I can tell. They're just reacting to certain situations. That's not my opinion. I mean, I've proven this many times over, but everyone's going to disagree when they have an agenda. Is that targeted operation in this case? Okay, let's take a step back at what we just saw. No, okay, I guess what she'll probably argue is that they were engaging with the targeted operation over here, right? So I was going to say that clearly that wasn't targeted when this is a reactionary thing, but it says in Minneapolis against an illegal alien wanted for violent assault. And of course, wanted, again, many of these cases turn out to be not even the right guy, or they'll stand there and go, we were getting a pedophile, and you look into it, it turns out to not even be true. They have talking points they're putting out. That's not to say that they're not arresting valid people. I do think that is also happening. My point is that you can catch them lying, more than I've ever seen in my life. So it's worth considering they're lying, right? An individual approached the U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. Seen there. But that's not what happened. You don't say that when somebody has he walked up with a legal carry in his waistband that he had a permit for. They didn't know that was there. So what they're doing right there is trying to frame it in a way that makes you think they responded to his gun. The two officers attempted to disarm him. That's not what happened. They're just straight up lying. They didn't even know that was there until they got into the altercation with him on the ground. So the officers, plural, did not. One of them accidentally did this by accident, or by stumbling across it, as you can see in the video. The suspect said disarm the suspect, but it says the armed suspect violently resisted. Same thing I said about Renee Good, or the way they frame it as they tried to murder the officer. They're lying. I don't even think we need to stress that to people who are honest. Seriously. If you can't, this is the same point that Alec was making, that we can watch the same video. I don't think honest people are reacting differently. I think there are people with agendas or people that are blinded by their partisan side, and there's everybody else. More details on the armed struggle are forthcoming. The armed struggle. God, it's disgusting. Fearing for his life and the lives of the safety of fellow officers, they opened fire. But what do you mean fear for your life? You didn't know there was a gun until after the fact. So what did they even fire at? The sound of a weapon discharging, which very well seems to have been the officer themselves. Medics on the scene immediately delivered medical aid. That's a lie. Guys, I get a physical reaction from stuff like this because it's so dishonest. It's not the fact that I'm on a side or the other or that guy. It's about the government. See, this is what's always got me going. The powerful lying about the people that are under them and the reality of them using this. And it's not just dishonesty is one thing, but when they're lying, when you can prove they're lying, it just gets me. It frustrates me. The suspect also had 2 magazines and no ID. Okay. This looks like a situation where an individual wanted to do maximum damage. Oh, it doesn't look like that. Well, the evidence sure as hell doesn't show that. And they already knew that when they wrote this out. About 200 rioters arrived on the scene, protesters, and began to obstruct and assault law enforcement on the scene. Crowd control measures were deployed. Situation is evolving. Okay. Here's what even Twitter has to say. The man can be seen holding a phone and approaching a woman who was shoved. Do you realize how insane that is? That right out the gate, Twitter is going to go, you're making that up. Here are 3 videos that we know you probably already saw. When an officer throws him to the ground, at no point is the man seen approaching officers while holding a gun. They're lying to you. And this person says this too. Nah, we've seen all the pictures. He's just some big dude standing up to what he calls your little Nazis. So they murdered him. You can decide if you agree with the framing. Here's Kristi Noem. Also fact-checked. Police confirmed Alex Pretti was a U.S. citizen with a gun permit, and his gun was removed prior to officials fatally shooting him to death. Now, it shouldn't matter that Grok agrees with that. You could have seen it for yourself. We showed you the video, but I'm willing to bet there are some people that were thinking otherwise, even with the video we showed, until Grok said so, or whatever this is. And I find that frustrating, but we each have our lines, I guess. But video evidence shows that Pretti never drew the gun. Here's what Noem actually said.
Approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun.
Liar.
The officers attempted to disarm this individual,
Liar.
But the armed suspect reacted violently.
Nope.
Fearing for his life and for the lives of his fellow officers around him, an agent fired defensive shots. Medics were on the scene immediately and attempted to deliver medical aid to the subject, but he was pronounced dead.
She's basically just reading what they put out on the Twitter post, right? There's something I haven't gone over, but there's a post that came out discussing about how Cash Patel and Bongino were basically, when Bongino was still there, were in this argument about exactly how they were going to play out the Twitter back and forth about some FBI breakdown. How it was going to be like, I'll put this tweet out, and then you come and respond like this, and then I'm going to say that. And this is all coming out. It's all confirmed. And literally, we're yelling at people that were trying to investigate this, and ultimately, they were more focused on how the Twitter breakdown would go. You all know that that's exactly what we know is going on. I mean, you can look at these people and understand that. I just think about how clear it is that these are, I mean, they might as well be actors. And I don't even mean that legitimate, like in the actual sense, but that's something we should consider in the sense of who's actually driving the bus. But what I mean is they're just LARPing. They're coming out, live action role playing is what they want this to be. And they're just failing. It's hard to watch, but recognize how dishonest that is from top to bottom. But they circle the wagons. Every time. Lie, 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 never admit you're wrong. Sue everybody. I mean, that's what they're doing.
At the scene. The suspect also had 2 magazines with ammunition in them that held dozens of rounds.
As they tend to, but sure, makes it sound worse when you list it all out.
He also had no ID. This looks like a situation where an individual arrived at the scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement.
I was wondering, like, look at the 2 behind her. What do those 2 people think? It's never smart to just assume by their faces, but look at them. You know, it's like you get the sense sometimes it's like everyone around them knows what's going on. I think they do. I don't think everyone, I don't even think close to the majority are the kind of people they are. And that's uncomfortable. It's worth considering.
About hundreds of protesters then showed up at the scene. They began to obstruct and to assault law enforcement officers. We saw objects being thrown at them, including ice and other objects, and a rampant assault began, and even an HSI officer agent's finger was bitten off.
Oh my God. And, you know, just think about where we are right now. Like, even if that's actually true, the idea that we're at a point where you guys are acting, you are an unaccountable, lawless force. You have to understand, even, and I'm never, I repeat, never advocating for violence outside of you defending yourself. I just mean, like, I'm never going, you should respond to violence or go out there and hit them in the face, because I just don't think it's in your interest. Even if I might do it personally, that may be the case in some parts of my life. My point is that in the moment for us, it's wrong to do that. Rather, it's not going to be on our interest. But even if that's the way that went down, my point is, in the law of this country, it's roundly upheld. You have the right to like I said before, if a police officer does something illegal, and if a police officer comes in and kicks your door open without any identification, you have the right to defend yourself. If a police officer comes in your house without telling you and tries to shoot your family, well, that's more obvious, isn't it? You have a right to defend yourself. The point is, if there's a legal barrier, if they're breaking the law, and again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm advocating any kind of action against police officers. My point would be, no matter what it is, police officer, government official, anything, if somebody comes in illegally and breaks the law, you have a right to respond to that. And this is why they've upheld this with, for example, being pulled over on the side of the middle of a highway where no one's around. Well, there's examples of police or people pretending to be police who take advantage of women, right? So the law is clear that if you're not comfortable, you can go someplace where you feel comfortable. That's up, even though none of the police officers are going to want that. They're going to say you're evading arrest. You're allowed to do that. And that's the same thing with the front door and the law. If they're breaking the law, you have a right to react. I'm not saying that even the reaction should be violent in the sense of killing somebody, but in this case, if they're there doing something illegal, which we've established that they are, people respond to that. So is biting off their finger the right thing to do? No, in my experience, my feeling. But you have to point out that by responding to an illegal force, there's a different circumstance than just radical leftists who hate the government, who are fighting upstanding law enforcement. It's not what's going on. So when you have these examples of the law being broken and people respond, that changes the conversation. You can decide, court of law can decide, but what they're saying is wrong.
Crowd control measures were deployed to bring safety to the public and to law enforcement at the scene. And once again, I want to remind everybody that this situation and this tragedy did not have to happen.
You're damn right it didn't. So going forward, he says, Brian from High Impact Flicks, pretty much everything she said is a lie. She really wants it to look like being armed with 2 full magazines is some sort of criminal act. Notice how conservatives, as he writes it, are creating a situation where armed Americans are guilty until proven innocent. That's what I think Dan was saying, right? Or it was Ryan, actually, that by default, essentially, you've created a situation where the Second Amendment no longer matters. because it's there, right? But they can go, but asterisk, we argue you were in this situation or because of what you posted on Twitter and that you have a license for the gun, that therefore we have to react differently. They're doing all this stuff. And in this case, creating a situation where they can argue because you have it, even if it's legal, that they can rationalize the action. Then that means, in effect, it doesn't matter anymore. They can always find that loophole. They're doing that everywhere. Fourth Amendment, Second Amendment, First Amendment, everywhere. It's not unique to the right. Now, Brian Allen posts this. Minnesota just sued Kristi Noem. Probably go nowhere, but at least it's something. At least somebody's out there trying some action, impeachment, whatever it is, to sue her specifically over Alex Pretti's shooting, and it's a constitutional gut punch, he writes. Minnesota's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension and Hennepin County attorney say federal agencies blocked the state from the scene, which we know, took control of evidence and witnesses, and then refused to turn anything over to Minnesota so Minnesota could run its own criminal investigation. Now, this is where the argument comes in. Well, it's all Democrats controlling all the... Maybe. Okay, if you actually think that, then why wouldn't they take this opportunity to prove that to you right now? Why wouldn't the Trump administration or whoever is making the argument for why they're not allowing the state to investigate prove this? It wouldn't even surprise me if you came out and showed that every one of them are involved with a criminal conspiracy. I mean, this is what's so frustrating is that most of us are going, yeah, probably, but they're not proving anything. So then you get this situation where Republicans who want to believe their own side are going, but if they can't let them because they'll just cheat and lie. Maybe, probably. But if you want that to be the reality, then lay some evidence out where we can all bite into it and expose them. This is why I keep showing you that nobody's ever going to go to jail, because it's all narrative. Even though that I think that you can prove in most cases that there is criminal activity going on. It says, and here's the part that should set off every alarm in the county. The complaint alleges DHS didn't just lock Minnesota out. They allegedly let the scene collapse while evidence was still at risk. Guys, this is a cover-up. And this is the reality of what we see in many of these examples where the last one we saw, where the woman was shot 5 times or 7 shot times 5 holes, as the guy said. They drove the car away that was engaged with hitting her because they rammed into her. You can see it on the video. They drove away and they never came back. And there's more than one example where they're covering up evidence. They're withholding information. And it says Minnesota's arguing you don't get to investigate yourself in secret after someone dies. At the very least, fine. Let another state do it. Let some independent agency investigate, not the government. They're never going to allow that, guys, because it's quite obvious. I mean, look at this. Just a still shot of what we were talking about. Spraying this person, hand in the air. I mean, they tackled him after this. They murdered this guy. I mean, there's just really no way around that. That's not a hyperbolic term right now. Negligent murder is what this is. Now here is, I forget his name, Bovino. The point I was laughing at is they put out a video meme of him singing the Lollipop Kids song, which I'm sure drove him bananas because these people are all so insecure when it comes down to it. But, at least as like what I think I can see in the way they act, pounding their chest because we're so strong is usually the weakest person in the room. But either way, my point was just I'm glad to see people like that put in their place. That's out here violating the rights of Americans and claiming they're saving you. He shamelessly lies. And I'm just going to play this next one to make the point. But here is what the Twitter fact check says. Video shows Alex Pretti permitted U.S. ICU nurse, has a permit, filming with the phone in both hands when agents pepper sprayed and tackled him. Gun holster removed while pinned, fatal shots followed. Contradicts the claims of approaching with a handgun. They're all lying to you guys. These people are just the new enforcement arm of the country, and it's not what anybody asked for. So what's interesting, I could just play it for you right now, and it's identical, but why don't I just play this one instead? Guess what? It's identical what they're saying. As David Icke says, both are apologists to murder, and the fact that they are okay with that reveals why they got their jobs. Here they are. This might as well, this is like that. They're a threat to our democracy, part of the media. Same deal.
Individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic
handgun.
The officers attempted to disarm this individual, but the armed suspect reacted violently.
Now, we could go through it all, but my point is, shouldn't surprise anybody. Like, even if maybe you don't even think it's wrong. Like, they have a report that they listed off. Okay. It's all false, though, and they're lying about that. And they almost know that at this point, and they did it anyway. Pretty crazy. What I think, honestly, is even more crazy is the response of people out there. Here's Stephen Miller, first of all, though, before we get into that. He says a would-be assassin tried to murder federal law enforcement. That's how he framed this. This guy's always pushing the envelope because, my opinion, this guy is straight up working for a foreign power. That's my opinion. He is, in my opinion, on top of that, actively trying to bring this country to its knees. You decide what you want. It's completely my opinion. I just can't stop seeing as this one guy. They'll all say one thing and he takes it. You know what it feels like the same as what I've seen in the past. It feels like when Israel goes back to Israel and screams the thing that the U.S. doesn't want you to know. So they make an agreement. The U.S. comes back and says, it's okay, we did it this way. And Israel in the United States says the same thing. That Netanyahu will literally go back to Israel in international media where we can all see it and say the thing that makes Trump look stupid. Say the thing that makes the U.S. look weak and controlled. And then nobody does anything about that. And I always point that out. It feels similar. Except now it's happening here. Well, they'll come out and be like, we did everything this way and it's all, whatever, somewhat, even though it's a lie, at least somewhat measured. Then he comes out and goes, this would be murdering assassin Democrat deep state. No, it's always like that. Try to murder federal law enforcement. We have eyes. None of that actually happened. And this is the official Democrat account sides with the terrorists. I mean, just embarrassing. This is why I'm of the mind that most conservatives are just going, just stop, man. Like, this is embarrassing for all of us. And a lot of them are now very much calling it out. Here's Twitter. Videos of the encounter show the gun was never drawn. The weapon, the same stuff. It's all the same thing. And they just leave these up. They keep going. Automatically labeling Americans killed by ICE as terrorists is the Israelization of the United States. That's exactly what this is about, guys. Stephen Miller, also, an assassin tried to murder federal agents, and this is your response. What was the response? 1, ICE must leave Minneapolis. 2, Congress should not fund this version of ICE. Right. I mean, you could disagree with his standing, but that's pretty measured. And in response to shockingly illegal action, yeah, makes sense. And it says, no evidence has been released to support the allegation of assassination attempts. It just doesn't matter. And Robert Barnes says, unfortunately, because he's defended him pretty strongly in the past. Unfortunately, Stephen Miller lied. Why would you say unfortunately? Call him out, right? This kind of lie will badly hurt the administration's credibility on a range of other matters. Really? Like, he's lied about damn near everything. This man is a toxic, virus, whatever you want to call it. This man is hurting in everything he does what you actually believe. That's what I see anyway. Deserves to be called out a hell of a lot stronger than that. Here, Kim.com, responding to J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance says this level of engineered chaos is unique to Minneapolis. Hardly. And it's not even remotely as what we've seen in the past. But is it engineered? It could be. Depends on how you look at it. It is the direct consequence of far left agitators working with local authorities. Oh, okay. I mean, first of all, the claim that there's far left agitators in a general sense is real. Like, there's far right agitators. They exist everywhere. But is that what this was? I haven't seen evidence to prove that. But he doesn't care about that. How about working with local authorities? Now you're claiming they're working with the police? I would love to break that story down, especially if it was Democrats there doing that. That's a huge story. But guess what? They've never given you any shred of evidence to back that up. Engineered, Kim says, how did they make the ICE agent pull the trigger against an unarmed pepper-sprayed American on the ground? Guys, they're drowning in this right now. Kim is a largely, I mean, he's been more nuanced to some degree, but he's largely supported the agenda. You have no, and I could be wrong about that. Let's be clear. I don't follow every one of their work extensively. I'm just taking on what I've seen as we're passing. So bear that in mind. But I think mostly what I think it's generally accurate. I'm pretty sure he's largely supported some of the Republican side of this, Trump and so on. But like I said, he's been critical in some ways too. You have no political future in the United States, it says. No money Peter donates will change that. But I hear you write books. Now, I'd like to believe that's the case. Frankly, I bet you J.D. Vance becomes one of the next presidents, despite how I agree with him, which shows you we don't influence the outcome. Hopefully, we're starting to recognize that. Here's what Trump had to say. Now, there is a fake post going around that now, for all I know, it was deleted and then it's being lied about, but the fact check says that it's not real. I couldn't find it on True Social. It's one that makes Trump look like it basically says, you have a gun, you're a criminal, which wouldn't surprise me, to be honest. They're basically saying that, but it pretty strongly goes against what they were supposed to say as a conservative, right? But the claim is that's not real. Here's a real one from True Social. This is the gunman's gun, loaded with 2 additional magazines. Exclamation mark. This is a conservative, don't forget. And ready to go. What is that all about? Where are the local police? Why aren't they allowed to protect ICE officers? Why do ICE officers need to be protected? They're armed officers who are far more violent than anybody we're talking about. See, it's about creating the narrative that they are the ones that allow them to be at risk, even though they created the entire situation. And plenty of conservatives are calling that out. The mayor and the governor called them off? Question mark. Did they? I think they did, which is funny, but the way he phrased that. But the point is, why would that be necessary? The lies they keep spinning about the 1,000% increase, which is now what I think up to like 8,000. I'm serious. Different people say different things. It's all based on Homan's statement that's never been verified. There's no evidence to back it up. And most of the cases you can point to are them in some way instigating violence. And it says, it is stated that many of these police were not allowed to do their job, that ICE had to protect themselves. Okay. I don't understand what you're saying. Do firemen need other firemen to protect them from the fire? I don't understand what you're saying here. It says not an easy thing to do. Why does Ilhan Omar have $34 million in her account? That's a good question. I make the same point. Why have you gained $2 billion from being in the presidency so far? Why has Pelosi, the point is they all enrich themselves. Yes, it's insane to me that Ilhan Omar has that much money after, I get there's disputes about what she really had to begin with, but what they posted shows very little money in the beginning. And now she's got $34 million. That's insane. That's criminal because they're enriching themselves based on those positions. And just because everyone does it does not make that justified. I agree. But that does not then suddenly mean everything you're pointing to is real. This is a game they play, guys. And where are the tens of billions of dollars that have been stolen from greater Minnesota, state of Minnesota? Yeah, good question. Aren't you the one supposed to be doing something about that? Didn't you guys tell us you'd arrest some people? You can't keep pointing online like you're just some independent observer, Trump. You're in charge. Do something. Arrest somebody. You blame Bondi all you want. She works for you. At the end of the day, I haven't seen one person arrested of consequence in any conversation. But let's keep pretending like we're winning, right? We are there because of massive monetary fraud. I believe that. Then do something about it. Billions of dollars missing, legal criminals. Yeah, they keep talking. Do something, please. Anything. We want money back. What do we want it back now? See, they just skip past the part where you show any evidence or investigation and just demand money. And if you don't, then you're proving you're a criminal. Like it's childishly lazy. This is no different than the big bank robbery. You mean like you just did with Venezuela? Much of what you're witnessing is a cover up for the theft and fraud. There we are. That's the big point. Okay. So now we've skipped over all the fact evidence part of it and just went to, well, the fact that this is happening, even though we're driving most of it, is because they're trying to cover it up. Okay. Probably. I don't even think that really, but my point would be it's certainly possible. Not that they're not breaking the law, but that this is somehow, organized, which is not that far-fetched because of what we don't, talk about usually, that things can be created to distract from others. But if you look at the facts, it doesn't line up. They're the ones largely kind of like clumsily causing this, which is not what anybody seems to want. And at the end of the day, if you're claiming they're covering it up, then give us something to prove that. Like if right now the claim is they've got evidence that they're breaking the law, then why wouldn't they go arrest them right now? Why wouldn't Waltz be in prison? Or at least being charged with a crime? Then bringing them in for subpoenas about something basically unrelated does not mean anything. Or even if it's not, and they ask all these questions, that means they don't have any evidence. That means they're on a fishing expedition to bring them in to answer questions about their own crimes. You think they're going to do that? It's just frustrating. It's so clean. It's self-evident if people have been watching this and don't fall for the partisanship. The mayor and the governor are inciting insurrection. Oh, here we go. Back around with that. With their pompous, dangerous, and arrogant rhetoric. What they're saying, by the way, and I don't support them because I think they're just as much part of the problem, is exactly what's happening. You're breaking the law. You're violating the Constitution, the same Constitution that they would violate if they were in that position, by the way, but they'll happily point to it right now. They are not causing what you're doing. Instead, these sanctimonious political fools should be looking for billions of dollars. Okay, it's the same old roundabout thing, nothing of consequence. But they're committing fraud. That becomes the talking point, which is all over the mainstream alternative media. Chairman Representative Garbarnio has formally requested testimony from ICE, Border Patrol, and the USCIS leaders at a full committee hearing. How much you want to bet they just ignore this? Quote, Congress has an important responsibility to ensure the safety of law enforcement and the people they serve and protect. It's a big deal, but I doubt it goes anywhere. I mean, they don't seem to be able to enforce on anybody, even themselves. Like this just becomes a nonsensical continuation of pointing fingers. But I agree, they're breaking the law. The point would be this will be called a political move. It'll be called partisan. In some ways it is, because they didn't care when the other side was doing, when they were doing it, when they were in power, but at the end of the day, I'd love to hear what they have to say. But how much you want to bet they strong arm them? They won't. That's what I was saying before. they will not admit the person's name. They won't probably even under oath deny or refuse to admit who the person was who killed Alex. Unless I'm missing it and it's already out there, please let me know. I wasn't able to find it earlier. So let's end with the most unimportant part, but yet the most embarrassing part. All of the very obvious manipulating people out there who are still trying to pretend they're fighting the deep state and fighting against the illegitimate government power while literally building both of those things. Alex Jones. Exclusive. Yeah. Oh, breaking exclusive, even though it's 6 p.m. and it's been shared by 75 other people, but breaking to you alone, right? See video analysis proof that the latest ICE shooting, the armed agitator was justified. That's Alex Jones. The guy fighting for your Constitution, he says. The guy defending the Second Amendment, he says. The guy fighting the power in deep state, he says. Alex Pretti is seen reaching for his holster. Guys, insane. Like, let me understand, even, which is not true. This has been broken down. His own audience is calling him out. But if you understand, even if that was the case, after you had been attacked, pepper sprayed, tackled, and you're on the ground, what's legal about this? That's why I was saying that in the first place. They're breaking the law by doing all of this. As if there's not a legal justification, you're a citizen attacking a citizen. People have rights. Doesn't mean you should draw your gun right there, but that's not what was actually even happening. But my point is, even if it was, this is still Alex Jones bootlicking, parading, literally bowing to what the government wants. It's pathetic. Oh, look, I didn't even see this. Derek says, the more of a belligerent statist you become, the more people see you for what you are, a sellout. You literally warned us all since 2000s about the rise of the police state. You warned Americans would be labeled domestic terrorists. You warned about a scientific technological dictatorship. Now it's here and you're literally cheering it on. You're out of your mind. Now, I actually just think it's what he was meant to do. I think that's his role, sadly. And David Icke says, Alex Jones gets down on his knees before a picture of Trump and posts this. Mr. Anti-State Tyranny has long become a propagandist for it. An utter disgrace. No way back here from Alex. No way back from here, Alex. Only other Trump, Miller, Musk worshiping sycophants are listening anymore. I agree. Now, it's worth pointing out that I've been making these points for a lot longer than a year, I think, but since the beginning of this administration and before, about him, about others, about the change, about the awareness of where we are. It was my opinion, but I think hopefully you're starting to see, if you're new to this platform, like during COVID or any other situation, that because of our balanced, objective, nonpartisan perspective, there's a lot of us out there, I'm the only one, you'll find that it's very easy that we'll break through in the beginning of most stories, and not even because we have access to more information than anybody else. Sometimes we do because of work that we put in, but really just because there's so few of us out there that are at this level. So many of these mindless, David Icke is one of the people out there calling it out, and he's got a huge platform, but he still doesn't get the view that he should in the moments where you need to see it. That's how this works. The people like Jones, who continually get it wrong while everyone claims he's always right, ultimately get projected higher. Oh, this is Katie said this in the chat earlier. The same people who defended Kyle Rittenhouse are condemning Pretti. Think about that. What a perfect point to make, right? The same ones that were out there, which, by the way, he should have been defended. I agree. I believe in that. I believe the sense was, and look, you even see the way it broke down, the way that he kind of was crying in court. This was just a kid. I think he got taken advantage of. And I think he was out there legally with his firearm and got a situation occurred and he defended himself. And you could argue that he unjustly acted. That's a different point. We can all, that one was a little bit more, there was a situation that took place and there becomes more argument about whether it was more of the bottom line was that if you believe that you are under threat and you are holding legally, that's your choice to respond potentially with lethal force. The point would be you have a legal right to if you are actually being threatened, right? This is the way it works. The end of the point is that if you're out there defending him, and now you see the situation where a guy is not even literally holding his weapon, being killed in the street. And now it's shocking. Hard to imagine levels of hypocrisy. Now, Alex Jones again responds after this, after he posted this, clearly, flailing with people calling him out. Because, you can look for yourself. Look at the, where's this one? Oh, this wasn't the one. Well, there was one I was looking at earlier where he was crazy ratioed. It says, to be clear, read what I posted below. He reached for his holster. He didn't. We are not saying the gun was still on him when you can see he was removed in his footage. I mean, are you actually joking right now? Your argument is that his hand went to where his holster would be after the gun was gone, after there was, I mean, by the way, I disagree with that too. I think what you can clearly see the entire time is the opposite of that. But now he's just, this is what this looks like to me is Jones grappling. Like he's like, oh my God, this is such a negative, like people called him out. You look for yourself. His major supporters are going, really, man? So this is him trying to move the goalpost. I didn't mean he had it, or I meant that he still reached anyway, but that wouldn't even change the reality of it. And secondly, I don't even think that happened. He says that action alone of him resisting what? He wasn't being arrested. He was sprayed. They tackled him. It was I mean, I don't even need to do this. I quite frankly think that most everybody looking at this is just embarrassed for him. And it says, and reaching for his holster is what led him to getting killed. That's what he just argued. All in capital first letters for some weird reason. This is the rhetoric of Democrat leaders calling for civil war. Oh my God. The only people actually calling for exactly that are people on your side, whatever you think that is. And armed uprisings against the federal government. I mean, okay, can somebody please point to me? And I'm sure it's out there, but where are the people with the level of reach and following of these people out there going, let's overthrow the government? Most of the people I see that they're calling doing that are the Democrats out there saying, this is legal. This is what the government just did, a crime, and literally beginning to basically support the Second Amendment. And here's Alex Jones doing the opposite. And again, it says right here, video of Pretti holding a phone, not reaching for his holster when federal agents tackled and pepper sprayed him. An agent removed his gun from his waistband. I mean, even Twitter is going, you're wrong, bud. You're wrong. And he doesn't care. David Icke says, I have been saying for years that civil war was the goal to divide and rule and justify military crackdowns. And do you think that's more likely or less when Trump's Gestapo is killing Americans? You have only one eye, Alex Jones, and it's not all seeing. It's the left. It's the left. No, it's the cult working through right and left. I mean, you know, he has the ability to consider the most obvious point in the room. He's like painfully ignoring the gigantic elephant in the room. But David continues, but that doesn't fit the narrative spewed by the psychopath you promote. Tragic to see what has happened to you, and you have doubled down so often now to defend the indefensible that you have no way back to credibility among anyone except the same ever-diminishing mentality. David Knight calls him out. One of the many who have fled from his ridiculous platform that have continued to speak out about how nobody checks any sources and how it's always been manipulated. I mean, it's not a secret, guys. Ask any of them, from Greg Reese to David Knight to any number. I mean, Owen Schroyer at this point, but you know, there's differences there. But the point would be from, I mean, the Burmeses of the world, the Rich Groves of the world. They'll all tell you the same thing. Alex Jones is the one. He says he wasn't reaching for a gun. They shot him after they took the gun. Alex Jones is the one reaching for an excuse for the police state to murder gun owners, just when you didn't think Alex could stoop lower. From documentaries warning about the police state to cheering it on, I regret I ever worked for lying, traitorous, opportunist, and shill, Alex Jones. David Icke has pointed out what controlled opposition Alex has revealed himself to be. It's intense. Here's what he said in response, doubling down. Right, so this one says, video evidence proves the ICE shooting of Alex Pretti during the ICE rioting in Minneapolis. Rioting, of course, he's not objective. Was justified. He says, meanwhile, crazed Antifa rioters are now literally biting off the finger. See how this works? Was it literal? Who's to say? I mean, I don't know what happened. I mean, I looked a little bit when I saw this going around, but I don't see anything I can prove it with. But my point's the same. If one random maniac bit his finger off, that doesn't then make everything you're doing illegitimate. That'd be the same as somebody, I don't know, let me off the top of my head, you know, waving a Nazi flag at a trucker rally and then blaming everybody for being Nazis. Didn't you also call that stupid, Alex Jones? Yes, you did. But you're a hypocrite. Everyone can see that. This person says, how was it justified? And he goes, I noticed you have Abraham Lincoln in your profile. You must not know your history. What a deflection. Are you ever embarrassed? It says, what do they have on you, or what are you selling your soul for? He says, I stand with ICE and their constitutional mandate. I don't know how that can get any more clear. And I simply said, remember this, because it will be important. Victory Gin says, imagine claiming that you needed to hoard guns in case the federal government attempted to invade U.S. cities. Then when it happened, you rooted for the federal officers, justified the broad daylight execution of an unarmed citizen, and still pretend that you are defending the Second Amendment. Now, whether you agree with the first part of the framing, hoarding guns to defend. That's arguably what many people have said, including Alex Jones, which is some level of the reality, which is really what it was about, defending against a tyrannical government. But think about how crazy that is, guys. I mean, it's worth pointing out. Here's Daniel McAdams pointing at what Sean here said, McCarthy. American right-wingers be like, of course the feds were justified in executing him. He owned a gun. It's just incredible where we are. And Daniel McAdams says, rightly, there is no American right wing. Now, it depends on how you mean that. I would take it as like the team sport politics, like mainstream GOP. Whereas I think there's plenty of conservatives who identify with certain values, but aren't blindly adherent to the party line, right? And even then, pretend like they are when Massey is more so doing so, but call him a Democrat. It's weird. But he says it's completely demolished under a mountain of boots that have been licked. But hey, that Border Patrol dude has a snazzy SA-style uniform, so it's all good, huh? I wonder if somebody posted it. It is actually pretty wild. It's Bavino, right? Uniform. It's just like straight out of a movie. No, it's just, there it is. Perfect. Look at this, guys. I mean, is this not like straight out of some kind of movie of the Gestapo or, some kind of Orwellian future? Clearly, this guy has a complex, I think. He's clearly projecting his strength when it says the opposite to me. But here is a clip from Nick Sorter saying, breaking, yet another angle shows now deceased leftist agitator, Alex Pretti, aggressively resisting arrest. No, they say whatever they want you to see in it. And it says, at one point, Pretti seems to be attempting to jump on the back of a protester. What? This is Nick Sorter, ladies and gentlemen. These are the people that the administration has leaned into. These are the children in the room. And I mean that in every possible sense, other than literally. You guys, we're talking about people that are like willfully dishonest, people who will come out and cheer on the small. I mean, it doesn't even matter. These are people that are showing themselves to be childish and naive and blindly adherent to whatever the team says, just like exists on the left. Bro flakes and snowflakes, same thing. Propaganda & Co. says he isn't resisting. He got pepper sprayed in the face while trying to protect the woman that was aggressively shoved to the ground. He slips and eventually falls because the ground is slippery and ICE agents aren't grabbing him from different directions. Now, whether that's exactly what happened or not, hard to say. But he was not doing something that they claim. He wasn't being violent. He wasn't trying. He basically got sprayed, fell to the ground, and then they dove on top of him. It says while on the ground, he covers his head to protect himself from being beaten, which he was. Then an officer sees his weapon, probably yelled gun before taking it. I haven't been able to confirm that, prompting the other people to fire at him in panic. He does not deserve to be killed, but Nick Sorter is out there cheering it on like it was some football game. Here's Tim Pool. He says, holy SHIT, could this have caused the shot leading agents to believe he fired on them? As Tim grabs on to what's going around online and Max acts like he discovered it and posts the image of a P320 SIG. Okay. And it has a tendency to fire. Okay. And he goes, is it possible? Sure. Anything's possible, Tim. Your effort is to go, could it have been his fault? Is it possible when agents yelled gun, then grabs it, SIG discharges due to deflect other agents due to things, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Bottom line is, oh, it's weird. Hold on. Didn't I have something? Oh, I guess not. Didn't I have it captioned? I thought I had something on there. I guess not. Anyway, the point was this is about trying to bring this to the level of, yeah, so this, that's what it was. It was down here. So this person says, no, firearms expert here. Who's to say if it is or not, but you can do your own due diligence. The firearm was 20 plus feet away in the hands of an ICE officer when in the gray jacket, which is true. You can see that in the video. So you see, this is Tim, as usual, either not doing due diligence as usual, or just framing it the way that whoever's asking him to, whoever's handling him to, whoever's paying him to, does so. Because you could see it. I saw it took me 20 seconds to find the information around this, and I looked through the videos, and I went through this, and then I researched it all morning before doing the show. It's easy to see right away that you can see multiple angles and prove that. It says it was not dropped, and after the shooting, you can hear that officer saying, I have the gun over 100 feet away. Please stop, Tim. This was a bad shoot. Tim's trying to rationalize why it was okay. The point, though, is that if he did, which you can see it, I showed you in the video, have this gun, only one of a few things is possible. Either he accidentally fired it, which is what I was considering, right? That's what I was saying in the first place. Or somebody else just popped off a shot for no reason, and then others fired afterward because they didn't know what was going on. That makes sense with how bad these people are trained or how ideologically driven they are. But this is what Tim said today. It was today. It was at 9 a.m. today. Trump needed to invoke the Insurrection Act a long time ago. Civil War Tim Pool, who can't stop pointing at Civil War every day, seems to be the one trying to drive that. As somebody recently said, anybody calling for the Insurrection Act, they were convinced is trying to create civil war. I mean, what are we talking? Insurrection Act? These people are the most un-American people in the conversation. In the point of like the principles we represent, the values we have in this country. These people are trying to destroy this, whether they realize that or not. Of course, he cites Cam Higbee, one of the obvious influencers being paid from Israel. That's not my opinion. He went there. He was one of the people in that room, and these people are very clearly promoting these agendas. Now, you can go through this if you want. I'll actually include it in a second down the. They're showing you things like this. Basically so you have to understand, ICE is breaking the law by not identifying themselves, by not serving warrants, and a ton of other more serious. Those are just the obvious kind of ubiquitous ones. Those alone justify people watching them, justify people following them, justify people trying to prove who they are. They're not protected by what they think they are when they're out there willfully violating the law. I'm not saying be violent. I'm not saying dox their personal address. I'm saying you have a legal right to know who they are and what they're doing in a official capacity. That's your right as a citizen. These people like Tim don't care about that or are too stupid to know that. In this case, Cam Higbee's out there going, oh my God, he infiltrated these signal chats, which, okay, I don't think they were even trying to keep it out because at the end of the day, you can look, I'll show you his entire feed. It's basically going, here, they're here. Look, here's his license plate, which is you're trying to prove where they are. That's your right. Oh my God, look, they put a piggy symbol underneath it. They must be terrorists. These are snowflakes, guys. How embarrassing for you. And the Insurrection Act, because not clearly on foot walking the dog, so had to leave, but confirmed 2 in front seats, watching police officers. Yeah, I mean, seriously? Cop watching has been a thing ever since I've ever been doing this. It's always been upheld because it's legally allowed jurisdiction to call back if they hindered public safety. What are you pointing to argue Insurrection Act? That they're there and they're Democrats. This guy is a joke, man. I mean, a lot of these people are showing themselves to be what we've always told you they are. Now, in response to Tim saying, people should not be willing to arm up and fight federal agents dispatched by duly elected government. That's not what happened. And he literally says, we won. We want ICE enforcement. You have no right to get guns and try to stop us. Us? You're the government now, Tim? I mean, guys, these people expose what they really are every day. This is democracy. You are fascists. I mean, he's a caricature. Half the time I feel like he's almost over, like maybe in a way trolling the conversation. Maybe that is what he's doing, but that's not how it gets taken by most people that support him. And ultimately, it's just a cartoon of even the conversation that's being had. You're the fascist. No, you're the fascist. It's a joke. Every part of the government right now is acting the same way. Is it COVID or is it what they're doing now? It's all the same thing, guys. People like this keep you lost in the middle. And Dylan rightly says, we won is the most childish phrase in politics and the fastest way to announce you have no idea how power actually works. Well said. Thought I shared that earlier. He says, you didn't win anything. You were useful. You were mobilized and emotionally leveraged to help an apparatus secure control, and now you're being rewarded with the illusion of participation while decisions are made far above your reach. Tim Pool is not the government. He is not there in the room. He is not setting policy. He is a mouthpiece whose job is to translate state action into tribal reassurance and keep his audience compliant by believing they're victorious. Well put. People like Tim will cheer for a machine that would turn on them without hesitation. In many cases, has in the past. Convinced it belongs to their side simply because it borrowed their voice on the way up. It's incredibly sad to watch. Very well put. Here's Nick Sorter. Breaking: leftist rioters in Minneapolis are now chanting burn down Fort Snelling, which is the location of ISIS facility. They're declaring a kinetic war on the federal government. Guys, this is just worthy of making fun of people like this. I mean, even if that's actually what their plan is, are you going to pretend that them saying it in a big public location is their plan to invade the government? I mean, come on, guys. It's stupidity. It's as stupid as pretending that January 6th was a planned invasion. It's an effort to drive that by the government. This is pathetic. As Ryan Grimm says, he goes on to say, send the troops before it's too late. These are the guys fighting the deep state, guys. That's what they want you to know. These are the guys defending the Constitution. Send in the military. These are the guys stopping the globalist over. I mean, come on. It's never been this clear in my entire life. And as Ryan Grimm says, the troops are already there, bud. I mean, it's just insane. We're just beyond pussy comitatus and the military martial law, police state that Obama would sneeze hard. They'd be like, martial law. And here we are with the troops marching through the streets with the Gestapo. And we're like, yay, freedom. So saying, look, they said burn down the fort. Okay. I don't agree with calling for violence, but I mean, this is something that happens constantly within the both sides. And then both sides point to the other and go, see, they're the one. When if they are doing what they're saying, I don't mean in this case, but just in any context, at the end of the day, you're the useful idiots. Both Nick as a useful idiot and the people chanting that, both of you are allowing them to be used to make this childish game in the middle where they just use you to justify their action, whatever side you're on. But yeah, Nick, a kinetic war, they're threatening a kinetic war. Does anybody actually believe that? I don't think he believes that. It's embarrassing. And Matt Walsh, because he's doing the same thing. He says, if you dress up in your militia costume, arm yourself, and then go out in the street with the express intent of interfering, because yeah, we can prove his intent. How often do I make fun of that? Anyone trying to tell you what they know he was thinking, feeling, intending are stupid and deserve to be laughed at, or rather dishonest, because I don't think Matt's stupid. I think he's dishonest and he's trying to pretend he knew what this person wanted to do, even though the evidence of the information and the videos show you the opposite. But let's just even take the first part. Okay, if you dress up in your military costume, is that how he would frame the militia on the right? Is that how he would frame the different organized groups that have a right to exist because of the Constitution? Or is it only when it's a lefty doing the same thing? Even though that's not even what he's doing, by the way. But you see how he tries to belittle that? These people are dangerous. Whether they know it or not, they're actually very, very rapidly undermining everything that they were defending a second ago. Arm yourself, which is your right, I thought. Right, Matt? Right, Matt? And then go out into the streets and express intent of interfering with law enforcement, as if we could prove that. Secondarily, if law enforcement's out there murdering people in the streets, hypothetically, kicking in doors without warrants, hypothetically, then you would have a right to interfere. Right, Matt? These guys either don't know what they're talking about or are dangerously trying to destroy it. And then fight back when they try to arrest you, which didn't happen. And then you end up dead. You only have yourself to blame. Think about what he's saying. And for that whole series of deliberate and insanity, idiotic decisions. Right. So you're also a victim blamer. Okay. Propaganda & Co. says observing is not interfering. You could be killed for simply looking at ice, and Matt Walsh will justify it. And the same guy, observing, don't be an idiot. Like just this kind of dumb response, when that's quite literally what's happening. And they themselves have said that doing so is impeding. Snatching the phone out of their hands, going, didn't you learn? Or the ones saying, now you're on a terrorist list. I think people like Justin down here, whether a bot or not, which is certainly possible, if he is a real person, they don't care about any of that. They can't, because it's all out there. It's all very public. You'll post it down there and they'll call you a liberal. You know, the reality is there are rights and principles. Whether you're on the left or the right, there are things that are enshrined by our, that are outlined by our Constitution that these people usually act like they believe in, except when it doesn't work for their agenda against a certain side. Jack Posobiec, of course, because they're all doing it. There's only one example. Tons all day long. They're all doing the same thing. He comes out and says, Pretti was conducting an illegal armed roadblock. Think about how insane that is. This is Bondi level. No, he wasn't. And it says to obstruct ICE operations. Did not have an ID or carry permit, but he did though. You see, Jack's lying to you. ID is irrelevant. Carry permit, yes, he did. Engaged officers, no, he didn't. And violently resisted arrest, no, he didn't. Now, here's what I think. I think people like Jack don't even look at the information. He might even genuinely think this is what happened because he's buying his own BS or leaning into the circle that he otherwise, or the CIA or whatever it is giving him information that he thinks he can trust. Whatever the narrative is or whatever the back and forth is, he's wrong. He's shockingly wrong and doesn't care to back it up. Like this is from this morning. You think he doesn't know that by now if he happened to be wrong in the beginning? Doesn't matter. As Robert Barnes says, Jack is lying here. The officers instigated everything. He didn't roadblock anybody. That's not even in the conversation. He never brandished his gun once. He calls getting pushed assaulted and murdered as him having engaged officers. Embarrassing propaganda slop. Oh, look, I didn't know he responded. Check it out. He says, go ahead and watch the full video. Yeah, Jack, we all have, bud. You're back in 9 a.m. Long past that right now. He goes, he's right there in the road obstructing operations before he engages the officers. No, he's not. Guys, everyone has the information. Everyone's down here posting it. He doesn't care. Don't know how else to put it, my dude. This is because they know, even when wrong, if they just keep doubling down, they'll win some people over. Wild. Here's Laura Loomer, of course. If you resist arrest, you'll likely be shot. Just a lazy lazy kind of use of what everyone else has been saying. It's just, what do you mean? Anyway, she's not even worth engaging with. Like these people, she's like the dumbest down version of everything else that's been happening. Barely even in the right path. You would think people would know this by now. That's what she's got. Even though none of that actually happened. It just looks to me like he was being beaten, which we all saw. Execution is not the punishment for resisting arrest. You see, that's my point. Is she just lazy with it? So now if you try to run away, you get shot in the back and it's their fault. If you resist arrest, you get murdered in the street. Neither of those things actually happened, but that's the best they've got. These are stooges for the state. Sean Davis, unfortunately, says Trump needs to take the leash off and just allow, but encourage law enforcement to be far more aggressive and violent towards rioters, which means anybody, since they call everybody rioters and terrorists. Does this guy really think this? Or are you just not able to see how this will be abused? He says more aggressive, non-lethal violence. Oh, yes, because that makes sense, right? You just saw what happened. This is from yesterday. And you're telling me that you want more violence, but non-lethal, though. Explain for me how that more from what we just saw is anyway non-lethal since they just murdered somebody. At the outset, reduces the likelihood of deadly violence being used later on. So be non-lethally violent, very extreme, and hope that doesn't boil it. I mean, that's not even logic, guys. That's just dumb. That doesn't even make sense. If you come in with violence, it will cause violence. They know that. That's a policy for them. If Renee Good had been punched in the teeth, he says, and dragged out of her car, she wouldn't have been capable of running down a cop, which literally didn't even happen. January 24th, that's what he's still saying. Is he buying into the fake information, looking at Megyn Kelly's altered video? Or is he just not caring to even look? Or does he know and doesn't care? And they wouldn't even need to shoot her. Great. So your response is that somebody should be punched in the teeth and dragged out of the car because you don't like what they're doing? These are bootlicker authoritarians, guys. It's pathetic and it's painful. How many of these people are out there who in many cases had correct takes about plenty of other things, like during COVID-19? Now here's Cam Higbee showing you this bombshell. We suspect an observer was shot and has been taken to the hospital. Okay, well, that's happening. And it says, I cannot stress enough, Ryan Grimm writes, how stupid some of these people are. This is the brain trust of this goon squad. You found people texting about news and developments? Yes. Cam Higbee says, Alex Pretti on Signal conspiracy in the highly organized anti-ICE rapid response signal group. That's how he's framing it. It's a chat with people who are protesting, and you could look at it for yourself. He says, we suspect an observer was shot. Observers are what they call ICE chasers. And okay, I mean, dedicated to hunting down agents, harassing, well, that's how you sure frame it. The reality is observing, as the word makes it. If Tom is correct, the situation is significantly worse than we initially thought. Man, you're talking about the fact that they just shot one of those people observing, and you frame this as their conspiracy because they're observing that? That's just straight up desperate, guys. This is Cam Higbee. It's the same person. And here, if you want to look at it, like I said, here's the whole damn thing. You can go through every single one of these and be shocked to find out that it's looking at where they're going. Here's what we can see. There's a dispatch. There's a license plate checker who's scanning our license plates with the FLAC camera, which is unconstitutional. I mean, you go through it. It's painful, guys. Sharing our Bloomington patrol zone map, which is loosely based in the city. I mean, these are people who are legally required to identify themselves, who are not, and they're trying to do that. And apparently that's terrorism. That's the Noam Bondi stupidity level of where we're at. Cam Higbee is just doing what he's told, I think. And it's just pathetic. None of this is even a problem, let alone a crime. It's just crazy what they're trying to do. Now, as Kim rightly points out, Israel trains ICE. They do. And many clear overlaps, despite what they keep trying to tell you. And as we know, Israel shoots first, blocks ambulances, calls the victims a terrorist. It's cartoony showing, but it's real, which will end with this. Couple points. Play the short version of this yet again. Army veteran and whistleblower Anthony Aguilar, who went to Israel, who proved that they were working with ISIS elements, who proved to you that he watched them kill children, didn't change anything, apparently. They're still, literally Netanyahu's on the board of peace, for crying out loud, for Gaza, a Gaza of which has no inclusion of any Palestinians. I'm just blown away some days. Remember, here's what he told you on January 7th.
The suspect all.
Oh, that's right. I didn't play that one because it was identical. But here's this one.
Come to your neighborhood. Think again. I have been to Israel where ICE agents and DEA agents and other three-letter agencies train with the Israelis, and they bring those tactics back here.
Now, you know what's actually funny about that? Like right there, no justice, no peace. Whatever you think about where that comes from or who's driving it, I guarantee you there are average people there that they're just with that, believe it, think and rightly so, are calling out a crime, right? They framed that statement as terrorists, or as paid agitators and Antifa, and okay, because they say no peace, they're fighting for violence. Is that what it means? Or does it mean that until you give us justice, we're not going to let you ignore this? It could mean both. It could mean all. It could be somewhere in the middle. Because anybody who's not a completely blind partisan follower is going to recognize that that's how that works. There are going to be people that go out there and yell, treason and could intend to murder somebody, and they could rail treason and mean that they should go to jail, right? You can always interpret it the way that you want it. The truth is they're breaking the law. That's what matters here. If you're going to extend this out into the person trying to call them out for that and criticize the way they're doing that, well, you damn well better acknowledge the crime first. And sure, if they're doing it in a way that is illegal, call them out too. But to skip over the crime and say they're doing that in a way that makes me uncomfortable and probably means terrorism, you are exactly what you've always been fighting. You are the broflake to the snowflake. You're the same conversation.
Families are suffering every day. The oppression that we export, we bring it right back here. Look around. We are the ones suffering. Children in Gaza are suffering. Fathers, mothers, families are suffering. We bomb boats off the coast of Venezuela. We blow up Colombians in fishing boats and say, oops. If you don't think that won't come to your neighborhood, think again.
Now, I'm going to end with another clip from him. But first, I want to show you a couple things that I added on toward the end. This is the clip I'm going to play at the end. It's another new one I hadn't seen where he's talking about similar things. I think it's a good thing to consider at the way out. He simply, well, I'll do this and I'll read it at the end. How do you say that? Olia Scooter Rasker, I'm not familiar, simply says, this is today, this morning, protesters stand off with Border Patrol and ICE agents during attempted raid at City View Apartments in Minneapolis. Now, there's probably a lot going on right now across the country. And for some weird reason, hyper-focused on Minneapolis. I think it's obvious why. But all I'm trying to highlight here is that off the back of something like that, such an obviously unjust action that is then being completely supported by the government, what do you think people do? I'm not saying it's rationalized or justified to go out there and commit violence or do something illegal in response. In fact, I argue that's never the right thing to do. But you have to understand, at what point does this become the justification? Same thing the right was saying, right? They stole it all. We should rush in and steal it back. Okay, well, even if you're right, doesn't that seem like that was used against you? Yes, guys, this is how this works. So don't take the bait, first of all. But I just want you to think about, even whether organized or not, that average people, especially if they're all, numbed out on antidepressants and whatever else the world is being suffocated by, or, a lot of things that are driving other things going on, or just psychological manipulation. My point, though, is that you're out here doing something wrong. And some people eventually are going to rationalize doing it back, which we shouldn't support and we should call out too. But that it's something you can understand. And on top of that, that you have people that might start taking a little bit more violent tactics because what they're doing is illegal. And even then you're forced to have the conversation that, well, that doesn't make what they're doing illegal if they're simply, and I don't want to advocate for that. But you have to understand, this seems like they're trying to create this area where they can then, look, they're turning the streets into a war zone, which they can then, each side points at each other and it never stops. And what do they get from that? Well, they get the easy rationalization to do whatever they want next, forever, apparently. I just don't know why this at the very least has to be obvious in the history. How many times this happened? So at least consider it today. And so I'm showing you this because I'm just showing you that there is more engagements going on. They're not stopping. At some point, this is going to get even worse. And that's the only fault here is of the police enforcement. Now, here's an interesting point. Mario Naufel says AOC obliquely compares Trump to Hitler. Okay. Well, it's not that difficult to do today. It's also not too difficult to do with Biden or Bush or Obama, but you can clutch your pearls at how, oh my God, they said fascist. They want to kill everybody. Well, here's the clip of Trump saying fascist 75 times against Democrats. Here's the clip of Miller saying fascist. It's very easy. I can bring it up right now. So when they do this, and they make it out to be that's going to cause violence. Well, same deal each way. And both times, it's the only person's responsibility is the one who commits violence. It's funny how both sides are the ones saying words equal violence, even though it used to be the thing only Democrats did. Well, what's important to me, not what she had to say, I think most of these people are very problematic, is that what they're saying is history shows us that mass movements have mobilized to protect us against fascism and authoritarianism. We need to stand up and push back is what she's doing. Okay, well, guess what? The authorization, the DOD 5240.01, to use U.S. military lethal force against you, U.S. citizens, on U.S. soil, was issued under Joe Biden. So I just want to end with this obvious point that hopefully brings this home. Is that sure, maybe even AOC believes what she's saying. Maybe she doesn't even realize that she's part of this left-right paradigm lie. I don't think so. I think it's clear that most of them know this. But what I'm trying to say is that, so here she is playing the rebel, right? We need to stand up to what is obviously wrong, what Trump's administration is doing. Just like when the Republicans were standing up to what was obviously wrong from what Biden's administration was doing. That's how this gets played. So you always think you're on, and right now even, they're trying to keep themselves feeling like they're the rebels while they're in power. I think that's where they've lost their step here. But what I'm trying to show you is that they play this back and forth on both of us. So if we can recognize that the force that Trump is currently using to quell you was given to him under the Biden administration, then you have to realize this is a ongoing evolution of the government narrative to get you in a certain position to carry out, justify, right? Give them the excuse for the agenda that they want as the government. Historically, guys, this has always been the case. I just hope we can start not just asking these questions. I think that's already happening at the possibly the majority scale, but start to actually have these conversations in a level, like bring it to the point of a congressional conversation. If you have that power, right? Bring this up in front of people that can't ignore it. If you're a huge if you have a massive platform out there, talk about it. Make this a conversation because it needs to reach the rest of the population. And on top of that, we just need to start being honest about what's actually happening. These people are committing crimes. I mean, right in broad daylight and just yelling the opposite. These people need to be in prison. Quite frankly, hopefully we can lead that to a place to where we can, discuss why government needs to exist at all. But that's difficult for most people. But I'll leave it there today in general, just to recognize, guys, that using what they're doing, they will pit us against each other. And we'll wake up in a new world that they've reimagined for us before we even realize where we are. And I believe that's what's happening right now. So thank you for continuing to support this platform. Thank you for continuing to fight for the truth. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
When tyranny becomes the law, rebellion becomes our duty. We can no longer stand for what's happening in our cities with federal state police. In 1940 Germany, they had a name, Gestapo. And someone has told me, well, that's not fair, and it is, because that's a German name for secret state police. When police come to our streets and they cover their face and refuse to give their name and are impugned to any laws and impugned to any investigation, and they can shoot and kill an American in our street without recourse, that is a secret police.